4, 3, 2, 1. Yes, Mick West, we are live.
Finally.
Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Dude, you're getting a lot of heat online from all these. It's all the flat Earth people and the chemtrail people. Those are the people that are mad at you the most.
Yeah, that's my specialty. Chemtrails and flat Earth.
Yeah, well, I asked people, which is this is hilarious. I asked people online. I said, Mick West from Metabunk is going to be here. What would you like me to debunk? And one of the first ones was chemtrails, because you cannot debunk it. It's real. Dun, dun, dun. I would say this to anybody who thinks that. That has got to be the most ineffective government program of all time. Like, you ask people what they're doing by spraying things in the sky, and the number one thing they'll say is, like, weather control. Weather control is one. Well, they don't have any fucking control of the weather, because if they did, they'd make it rain all over Santa Barbara and stop these fires.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage going on right now. There's a fire that's bigger than the city of Washington, D.C.
They think they're making those fires. They think that
that's right.
part of the conspiracy. Anything that happens is always part of the conspiracy.
What do you think it is? Like, what is it with conspiracies? Like, why are they so attractive to people? There's something going on with people, right?
Yeah. I think, I've been looking into this a lot.
I bet you have. Especially since you're a government shell.
Well, I'm doing research for the book I'm writing, which is
Right.
called Escaping the Rabbit Hole, and it's about how people get into the rabbit hole and how people get out of the rabbit hole. So the whole thing is about the rabbit hole, which is something basically people get sucked into. And I think people do a lot of research into the reasons behind people getting into conspiracy theories, like the psychological reasons and the personality reasons and things like that. But I think most conspiracy theorists are just regular people. They're just ordinary people who get sucked into something.
And why do you think that is?
Just from talking to them, they tell me like their origin stories, essentially. And they tell me what happened to them when they got into conspiracy theories. And it nearly always starts with them looking at some video. Like nowadays, it starts with them looking at some video, and then they just get sucked in. Yeah. And then they start looking at another video and another video and another video. And Facebook and YouTube is feeding them these videos, because once you start going down that road, you just can't change your trajectory.
Right. It's hard to train.
Yeah.
I mean, YouTube, since they instigated this autoplay thing, or instituted this autoplay thing, where the next video plays immediately and they're all related.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely been a thing with people. And also, like, the suggestions on the right-hand side if you're watching one video on a particular subject.
Yeah, I was doing some experiments with that. I set up like a completely blank YouTube account, and I would just go in there and type in one thing, like contrails. And of course, when you look at contrails on YouTube, like half the videos you're going to get are going to be chemtrail videos.
Right.
And so if the first video you click on is a chemtrail video, then that just sets you down that road.
Well, I remember this was in the days, I think, before YouTube. This was in the days when maybe YouTube was around, but it just wasn't that popular. I remember me and my friend Eddie were high as fuck, and we're talking to my neighbor, and there was some plane that was flying over, and we were wondering why the clouds coming from behind this plane stood so long.
Wow.
And so I asked him. I used to have this neighbor. I used to call him Bling Bling, because Bling Bling was incapable of talking about anything other than objects. Like, all he talked about, that's a nice car. Is that a new car? Where'd you get that watch? Like, that was Bling Bling. All Bling Bling wanted to talk about is, like, material possessions. So he and I were parked in front of his. I was saying hi to him, and I said, "Hey man, do you remember clouds like sticking around in the sky that long?" And he's like, "No, I don't know. Is that a new truck?" And like, I just remember how ironic it was, because I had told Eddie about Bling Bling. You know, that like, this is all this guy cares about and wants to talk about, and then he did that while we were out there. But I remember thinking, man, how weird would it be if all of a sudden clouds from jet engines started appearing, and it just appeared right before our eyes, and we hadn't noticed it. But I wasn't sold. It didn't make any sense to me, because my thought on it was the amount of people that had to be involved. You're talking about all these different airplanes, get all these people to keep their mouth shut. These are they're pilots, right? So they're not making shit tons of money, and they live here too. That's the other thing. Like if they're actually spraying something in the sky, they live here too. Like what are they spraying themselves?
Well, the theory now is that it's basically the power elite in the country is doing these chemtrails as a kind of last-ditch attempt to maintain power before the entire world collapses into chaos. So they think it's kind of like a desperate situation.
A power grab.
Well, not exactly. It's they're hanging on to have their kind of last hurrah. Like really, they feel like the end of the world is nigh. Like, you know, there's about to be this environmental disaster, and the chemtrails are the only thing that is holding everything together. That's the thing that you get if you go to, like, you know, Geoengineering Watch, that Dane Whittington guy. He's basically an apocalyptic prophet now. He's basically preaching about how everything is going to end soon, and the chemtrails are the only thing that's stopping it. But they're also making it worse. So he's kind of saying, like, you know, the chemtrails are helping, but we've got to stop them, otherwise they'll make it even worse. But we're pretty much all going to die either way.
Yeah, there's a lot of money, and we're going to die. There's a lot of people that love that trope. It's just like something that gets carted out constantly throughout history, because it's true. You are going to die. It's like, when are you going to die? You don't know. So because you don't know, you're freaking out. Like, is it going to be a car accident? Is it going to be a fire? Is it going to be an earthquake? Is it going to be a slow aging death? Or is it going to be the chemtrails? Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, I think that type of thing, like fear of dying, is one of those fundamental things.
Right.
That you know, every human is hardwired with certain things that that happens in their brain without them thinking about, and fear of dying and fear of other things, fear of, you know, fear of wolves or whatever, something that's hardwired, and that's the type of thing that leads to different types of thinking that you know, you end up being a conspiracy theorist in part because your brain is wired that way.
You had a great quote about chemtrails when we did that television show together. You said chemtrails are like the training wheels for conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Because they're like they're right above your head, and you just like you see them right there. For people who don't understand why jets produce clouds, please explain that, because it's very simple.
It is very simple. Jet engines have water in their exhaust. If you look at a car on a cold day and you see the exhaust coming out of the tailpipe, you'll see like a cloud of condensation sometimes, and you'll see some water coming out. And when the exact same thing happens with jet engines. And when that exhaust hits the cold air, it condenses, it freezes, it makes a cloud. And contrails are essentially clouds. They're exactly the same physically as a regular cirrus cloud. And
it's dependent upon the amount of moisture in the atmosphere, and you can actually monitor it online. NASA actually has a website that will show you, and I believe it's set up for pilots, right? Is that what the air traffic people?
NASA actually has a Contrail Forecasting site, which isn't really for pilots or anything. It's just part of their contrail research. But yeah, they have a site where it'll predict like where the contrails are going to be. But you can do it yourself. You just got to look up the relative humidity at a certain altitude. There's lots of different sites you can go to. I've got a whole bunch of them listed on Metabunk.
And just like the clouds vary in the sky, the amount of moisture varies in the sky as well, which is one of the reasons why you will see a jet pass through one area and you will see a contrail, and then it almost looks like they shut the contrail jets off, and then you see it pick up maybe a couple hundred yards later.
Yeah, and that's, when you say like a cloud, it's really exactly the same as a cloud. If you look at any picture of a cloudy day and then just remove all the clouds, but they're still there as invisible clouds, then when the plane comes along, it's almost like the plane is the magic pen revealing these invisible clouds. Because all a cloud is a region of the sky where the humidity is above a certain level. So you know that the humidity is pretty patchy across the sky because like there's a cloud here and right next to it there's no cloud. So where the cloud is, it's high humidity. Where the cloud isn't, it's low humidity. But if both of those were just lowered like 10%, then you get no clouds at all. Then a plane comes along, it raises the humidity in the cloud area and in the non-cloud area. But this area, because it was a bit higher, you get a trail forming, and this area you get no trail forming. So it's exactly the same as invisible clouds.
Yeah, and for people that are watching it and you're looking up, you think they're spraying something if you're conspiracy-minded. And because of a lot of the videos that are out there, in particular two that were recommended to me are what in the hell are they spraying? Right, so I got to meet with that guy that made those documentaries, and right away I knew something was wrong. Like he's either on Aerosol or something. He's just like real edgy and speeded up and just an odd guy, which is like a lot of people that are conspiratorially minded. They seem to be like they're nervous and agitated. And when we went over like why one of the things that he was talking about was the soil samples and water samples, and that they've detected all this aluminum and barium in water, and particularly aluminum. And he's like showing me all these results that he had. But even on the very results that he showed me, it said sludge. Like he had sent them out for testing. And I said, well, what did you send? And he goes, well, I sent some water from these, ponds. And I said, but it says sludge on your testing. And he said, no, but it was water. I go, okay, but the lab said it's sludge. I go, what is sludge? He goes, well, I don't know what sludge is exactly. I go, well, let's look. Sludge is a combination of water and dirt. Okay, so you sent water and dirt. So do you know that aluminum is one of the most common metals on Earth? And you could basically scoop up a patch of dirt pretty much anywhere and find a bunch of aluminum in it. It's really, really common in trace amounts. I go, so what you did is you tested dirt, and it tested positive for being dirt. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. And the guy was kind of freaking out. I'm like, how did you not put this together yourself? Like, if you're the guy who's making this video and you're trying to find a reason why you could, some facts that you could throw at people. We could say, hey, look, the government is definitely spraying things in the sky. They're spraying aluminum. Look, we found the aluminum, and we found it in the water. It's in your water supply. It's going to get in your body. It's going to poison you. Look, we found it in the water. How the fuck did he not look at it himself is what I was thinking. And when me and him were having this conversation, I realized, like, you have these people that go down, they're not open-minded in regards to these subjects. They go down a very narrow road, and that road is, the government is doing something to me. I need to find out what it is.
Yeah, and they're really motivated to actually find evidence.
Yes.
So that they're trying to find something, and actually trying to find an alternative explanation isn't really that attractive to them. So they find aluminum in the water or in the soil or whatever, and then they glom onto that as being, evidence of geoengineering. And that's great for them because they can just find loads and loads of samples of soil.
And that's something that gets repeated online. That very fact over and over again, the aluminum that they found in the water.
It's one of like the core tenets. It's like one of the pillars of the chemtrail thing. There's like 4 or 5 different things. Like in every conspiracy theory, there are these core beliefs that the 99% of the people who believe in the theory have.
One core belief is that you work for the government.
Yeah,
dun, dun, dun.
That is a core belief.
Mick is a retired video game creator. You could find that out. Made video games.
That's right. Tony Hawk.
Yeah, made a shit ton of money and decided to debunk dorks.
Yeah, I didn't start out, and I wouldn't refer to them as dorks.
I would. I'm saying they're dorks.
Yeah.
They're dorks if they don't believe. This is the problem. You're not a dork if you fall for something. You're a dork if you fall for something you don't believe the science that shows that it's impossible, that it's not real. That if you were spraying aluminum in the sky, folks, it would look like aluminum, you dummy. It wouldn't look like a cloud.
It wouldn't dissipate. It would look like a thin mist, essentially.
And metal is not. It's heavier than fucking air and vapor. It's not going to just sit up there like that. It would be a very different experience. It would slowly settle to the ground and wouldn't look like a cloud. And there's no reason to do it. There's no benefit whatsoever. There's no scientific evidence ever uncovered that there's any benefit for anybody of spraying aluminum over people. It's a waste of aluminum.
That's the thing. Even with the whole geoengineering field, there's really no solid evidence that it will work. We don't know what the side effects will be. We don't know how much we would need to spray, and we don't know, if when we stop doing it, will the world bounce back in a terrible way, and it'll be a big disaster.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because one of the reasons why contrails are interesting to study is because they actually do have an effect on the temperature of the Earth, and this is something that we found out after 9/11. When September 11th happened in 2001, it was the big disaster. There was a shutdown on all flights in the United States. And when they did that, the temperature changed. Because these clouds literally do provide like a cover. And do they act as an insulator or an escalator?
essentially act as an insulator. They block radiation, incoming radiation during the day, and they block outgoing radiation at night. But the net effect is that they actually block more outgoing radiation than they do incoming radiation. So if planes didn't fly at night, then you would cool the Earth down. You'd have to stop flying, quite a bit before nighttime. So if all the flights in the world were between 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. local time, then you could actually cool the world down by just not having any flights at night, because it's the night flights that have this really big kind of blanketing effect that stop the outgoing radiation.
So the night of flights actually heat the world up.
Yes, they do. They act like a blanket. You know how it's warmer in a cloudy day, like it doesn't get as cold at night. Deserts get really cold at night because there's nothing over them. They don't have any cover. It's one of the reasons. But yeah, the contrails will actually warm the planet because the amount of outgoing radiation they block is just way higher, just because of the wavelengths and the size of the particles and whatnot.
So that's something to be concerned about, that's something that people are legitimately monitoring. What people need to understand is just because you feel like when you look up in the sky and you see these crisscross patterns that they're spraying you. No one's spraying you. Yeah. This is just a natural reaction to jet engines and condensation in the atmosphere and the heat and the moisture of the jet engine. That's all it is.
They are actually talking about a way of using contrails for a kind of geoengineering. And this is something that people often get confused about, because you see these two words together, contrails and geoengineering, and they think, oh, that's chemtrails. But what they're trying to do is use air traffic control and computers and weather forecasting to make it so the planes don't fly through the contrail forming areas when they would make contrails at night, and make it so they do fly through contrail forming areas when it would make contrails during the day. So
this is a conversation they're having, or something that's actually being...
It's not something that they've actually done,
right.
But it's something that they can research fairly easily.
So if they were considering trying to heat up the atmosphere, or heat up the Earth at night, they would just fly over these moisture-rich areas, and if they weren't, they would avoid them.
Yeah, but the goal, obviously, is to combat climate change, global warming,
right,
and cool the Earth down. So a relatively cheap way of doing that, to a degree, is to have these planes be controlled by computers, and it kind of increases fuel costs for the airline by about 2 or 3%, because they have to make very deviations, sometimes in height and sometimes in direction. But it could actually have a significant effect on the Earth's climate if we had the entire world's airline fleets all in this program, where they would fly making contrails where they were needed and not making contrails where they were not needed.
And how exactly are they monitoring the moisture content in the atmosphere? Like, what are they using to do that? Satellites?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. They use sounding balloons, which are these weather balloons, basically, which got mistaken for UFOs quite a lot. And they use satellites, and they use planes sensing the environment when they're flying through it. And they use all these inputs, and it goes into a big computer model, which basically predicts what the humidity will be at any particular point. It's basically a big weather forecast for the upper atmosphere.
Now, Jamie, Google CIA admits geoengineering, because this is one that the chemtrail believers constantly bring up. It was a conversation that some guy in the CIA had at some meeting where they were discussing potential future ways to use geoengineering. Like, let's play what this guy has. CIA Director John Brennan. Go ahead.
Often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time.
Why is that freaking out with the image and keep changing back to...
It's a YouTube glitch. I have to refresh the page. I didn't want to restart the video.
Oh, just go ahead. Because I'm going to have epilepsy.
Well, yeah.
Stratospheric aerosol.
Hold on. Go ahead. Just take it from where he left it and hear what else he has to say.
Aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. an SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other.
Cool. We get it. So this guy is talking about an idea of spraying things in the atmosphere to do something.
Yeah, he's talking about geoengineering, spraying stuff from planes.
Well, he's talking about
he's talking about
reflective particles, right? Isn't that the idea?
Yeah, you spray sulfur dioxide, which isn't exactly a reflective particle, but it acts as like a nucleus for upper atmosphere clouds and things like that. It's basically, like you said, the same thing a volcano does. When a volcano erupts, it spews a whole bunch of sulfur dioxide and various other things into the upper atmosphere. And that creates haze, basically, which blocks the incoming radiation and cools things down. Every time a big volcano goes off, you see a little dip in the Earth's temperature because of this blocking effect that it has.
Right.
And so the theory is that you could do something similar, and you could do it by spraying things out of planes. But he's talking about things that we might do in the future. You see, every he uses the future tense, like we could do this, he may do this, the effects might be this. And he's talking about the possible geopolitical impacts of it, which are very significant. Like if one country is going to be spraying something that would cause the monsoons to double in intensity or to halve in intensity in India, that could cause the deaths of millions of people from famine and flooding.
Well, this is what people think has happened with the big hurricanes in the United States.
Yeah, they do think that,
yeah.
But there's no evidence of that actually happening. The pattern of hurricanes is pretty much the same as it's been for a long time. When you look at the statistical variations, there's maybe a bit more intense because the oceans are a bit warmer, but it's not. There's no. People think that hurricanes have been steered.
I've heard that one through HARP.
Yeah, through HARP, but that doesn't make any sense. But there are ways that do make sense, which are cloud seeding. Like if you do lots of seeding of the hurricane on one side, you could perhaps reduce the amount of humidity, of moisture on that side, and so it'll kind of turn a little bit more and move over to one side. So there are ways that might work, and they did actually experiment with this. I think back in the 70s or so, there was one experiment where they tried seeding a hurricane, but it ended up going somewhere else other than where they intended it, and it destroyed a whole bunch of houses.
The problem with having a video like this is that this guy is admitting that they have looked into potentially spraying things into the air.
No one has ever denied that. We've been looking into geoengineering for decades. It's been proposed in some sense for over 100 years.
The other problem
in a serious sense since the 70s.
The other problem is he gave it initials, SAI. That's a problem. People love initials. They love it. It makes them super excited.
Not even real. Well, most people use the SRM, which is the solar radiation management.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
SRM, SAI, CIA, DEA. People
SIA
love
sounds
those.
good. That sounds more scary than SRM, I think.
Strategic aerosol injection.
Yeah.
But there would have to be studies, and
there would have to be. There are lots of studies going on right now. People are studying geoengineering. There's actually lots of people who specialize in geoengineering.
What I was going to say is those studies would have to be available for people to understand, but nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to go and you want to look up and see the thing behind the jet and go, they started it, they're spraying, there's patchwork, look, there's haze all over us, which it does happen. You can have a clear sky and you have the right conditions and a bunch of jets fly over and all of a sudden it's very hazy.
It does. And that's the type of thing that's been reported since the Second World War, or even earlier. The first contrails that were spreading out into clouds were reported in like the 1920s.
Yeah, well, I took some of these photos and I put them up, I think the last time we had this conversation, where you could see them from World War II. You could see these jets, and you see the contrails behind the jets. But some people, that's the other thing. It's like contrails dissipate, but chemtrails stay. Well, that's not, you misunderstand what happens.
Yeah.
The contrails stay if there's more moisture. If the conditions are correct, they stay, and if the conditions are barely enough to make a contrail, they dissipate fairly rapidly.
With that thing, they kind of use circular logic. And if you ask them, why do you think that contrails dissipate and chemtrails stay? And they say, because I can see it. If you look up, you look at the chemtrails, and they're staying, and the contrails are dissipating. I said, how do you know which is which? Well, the contrails are the ones that dissipate.
Yeah.
So they don't have any basis for their belief. And the one thing I do, which you've probably seen, is that video where I go through all my old books on the weather, and I look up in each one of them the section on contrails, and I read the bit in it that says like contrails persist for hours sometimes, and contrails sometimes spread out to cover the sky. Contrails like last a long time, and I go back from these books from the 1990s all the way back to the 1950s, and I've got books in the 1940s. And if you show people these actual books, it's a really powerful way of like getting through to them, because they've just assumed that contrails can't persist.
Right. And they've assumed that this is a recent phenomenon because they don't remember it, because they weren't paying attention.
Yeah. Well, the people don't notice them until 90% of the people don't notice contrails until they hear about the chemtrail conspiracy theory. A lot of people, they will hear about it, and then the same day they will go outside and look at the sky, and then that's the first time they've ever noticed these contrails. Even the people who are like the high ups in the chemtrail movement, they only notice them when they hear about the theory. There's a guy, I can't remember his name now, but he lives in San Diego, and he never noticed them until like 2014, and he lived there all his life, and now he's publishing scientific papers. J. Marvin Herndon is his name. He's publishing these scientific papers about how they're spraying coal ash and like the waste products of burning coal in power stations. They're spraying that in the upper atmosphere. And he's actually got like 3 or 4 papers published in these kind of pay-to-publish scientific journals, and that's kind of becoming a bit of a problem. Like this thing with Brennan, the CIA guy. People bring that up all the time.
All the time.
All the time, and you just have to explain it to them again. I don't know, he's talking about the future use. And then this guy, they say, well, what about these papers?
He's talking about possible solutions for global warming.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with it is when he's talking about possible solutions and then people look up and they see these actual clouds that are created by jets, they assume that this has already begun and that the government would not tell us about it.
Right. And that's because they don't understand contrails.
The difference between contrails and what this stuff would look like.
Yeah, yeah. And just the fact that contrails look like this. Like they heard that contrails shouldn't persist.
Well, what's another thing that drove me crazy is like if you really want to worry about health consequences of these things that you see in the sky, there's a reality to it. The reality is they're burning jet fuel.
Oh yeah.
And all the people that live around the airports get sick. Like there's high levels of respiratory illness that are associated with living within a certain distance of airplanes or airports. If you are in a congested hub like LAX, don't buy a house like a block away. It's not good for your health. They're burning jet fuel that's going to get in the air.
It's pollution. It's
pollution
from a car.
But it's even more intense because you're having thousands and thousands of giant planes.
Mm-hmm. Even like small airports like Santa Monica, they have problems with that. Like if you look at the houses just at the end of Santa Monica runway, which is right next to the end of the runway, there's these houses. they did tests for like various metal particulates and stuff, and the ones right by the end of the runway, they get pollution.
Of course.
So it's very real problems.
That's the real problem, though.
Yeah.
And that's a real one. Now imagine if that was something that the government was engineering. If they really were engineering, spraying things to give people respiratory illness so that the hospital industry could profit.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever the reason was.
Right.
That would be, something that people could be concerned with. Like, look, there's a real connection between airplanes and illnesses. But it's not spraying stuff in the sky. That's not real. I understand people love these things, and I understand people don't trust the government. Those things completely make sense to me. But you got to pay attention to what's real and what's not real. Because as soon as you don't do that, then all the real stuff that the government does, like these fucking roads they're going to build in Alaska right now through dangerous areas where they have salmon rivers, where they're gonna start doing mining. I think, what is the Pebble Beach? Is that the no? What is the big mining issue in Alaska that is going on right now?
Bristol Bay.
Bristol Bay? That's it. Why did I Pebble and Bristol? I don't know how I got those two confused.
Pebble Mine.
Pebble Mine.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And they want to do this, and it's near a major salmon area where these salmon use this river, and people that live there are terrified that they're going to do this. This is a real for-profit thing where they're putting the environment at risk. That's real. So this is something that people should be concerned about, but they're not. They don't get concerned about those kind of things. Environmentalists do, and conservationists do, but the conspiracy theorists don't. They don't look at that and go, hey, here's clear evidence of the government being in bed with enormous businesses that stand to profit spectacular amounts of money from risking the environment and risking these very delicate salmon fisheries.
Yeah, and that type of thing is the exact reason why I still spend so much time debunking stuff like conspiracy theories, because I think that so much of conspiracy theories, the result of the effect of conspiracy theories is distracting people from real issues.
From real issues.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Like if you, like you say with the airplane stuff, like if people are thinking they're spraying chemicals out of the back of the airplanes, they're just not going to be worried about regular pollution. And if they think that they're controlling the climate already, they're not going to worry about any type of global warming.
So let's find one that we disagree on. I think you believe the official story of the JFK assassination, do you?
More or less, yes.
More or less.
Yeah.
My belief, and this changes over time, I think that Lee Harvey Oswald was in on it. I think he was a part of it, but I think there were multiple people that were in on it. That's what I believe.
Do you think there are multiple shooters?
Yes. And one of the reasons why I believe that is because of the formation of the single bullet theory. And the single bullet theory was formed because the fact that they had to account for one bullet that hit the underpass, ricocheted off, and put some man in the hospital. And that before that, they did not have an explanation for why all of these bullet holes, all these wounds were in all these different people's bodies. The other reason why I'm inclined to believe there's a conspiracy was the fact that they found that bullet on Connolly's gurney when they brought him into the hospital. It's too convenient, and the bullet itself is fairly pristine. Now, knowing as much as I know about bullets from personal experience of hunting, you can't hit anything with a bullet. I pulled a lot of bullets out of animals. When you shoot an animal and you hit bone, those bullets, they distort brutally. I mean, they don't look like that after they go through two people and hit all sorts of bone. That's the bullet that came out of Connolly's body, or Connolly's gurney, excuse me. And that's the bullet that they're attributing to this single bullet theory. If you look at the path of the bullet that goes through Connolly, or goes through Kennedy and then goes through Connolly, that to me is not unbelievable. It's not unbelievable.
That one is. But you got to look at the other one.
But even that one. But no. See what I'm saying? Even that one is not unbelievable. It is believable to me because I know that bullets do strange things when they hit things.
Right, but you got to combine that with the fact that the bullet came out fairly pristine, which means it didn't actually go through a kind of a bouncy path like that.
Right.
It went through a straight path. This diagram is from a
conspiracy theorist.
Yes, essentially.
Yes. But the thing
there are other
is,
diagrams that will show the actual path with him. Like, they've got their butts there on the same level, and you know that Kennedy was actually sitting
he was
above
elevated.
Connolly.
Yes. So see if we can find one that has the actual seating arrangement or more accurate seating. Well, the one right there with the red line in the right-hand side, the one on the right-hand side, that's a more accurate.
From above, yeah.
Yeah, from above.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that there was particles. There was more metallic particles from the bullets, more fragments from the bullet in Connolly's body than were missing from the bullet. I do not believe that was the bullet, and I think that is a very reasonable assumption.
Well, you know what you should do? You should get one of those guns, get the same bullets, get some ballistic dummies with some bones inside, and start shooting.
They've already done that.
Yeah,
Penn and Teller did that.
Yeah, but some people have done it, and they have found pretty close to what actually happened.
No, they didn't.
Within the round.
No. Every bullet that hit bone got distorted. That's just what happens. When you shoot those bullets into water, or you shoot those bullets into like fluff or something like that doesn't have a lot of impact to slow the bullet down, then you get a bullet that looks like that. If you shoot a bullet into bone, they distort wildly.
But the bone was the last thing that it hit.
But it doesn't matter. It's still hitting bone.
But it stopped at that point.
Yeah, but I mean, didn't it hit bone in Kennedy's body as well?
Went through his neck, didn't it? So
the odds of it hitting only soft tissue, and it's going to go through his neck, and it came out here, that it didn't clip one of his vertebrae or something like that, I don't think that's real.
Yeah.
I think also there's a difference between, and this is fact, from David Lifton's book, Best Evidence, which was a book by an accountant who went over the Warren Commission report and found all these factual inaccuracies and all these contradictions. He found that there was a difference in the autopsy report at Bethesda, Maryland, the Bethesda Naval Hospital, versus what they had reported on the scene in Dallas. The first doctors that got a hold of Kennedy's body in Dallas before they flew him to Bethesda said that the hole in his neck was an entry wound. When they got to Maryland, they changed that to a tracheotomy hole. They changed the impact, and they said that it was. They said that this was not an impact from a bullet; that it was from something else.
yeah, someone said they enlarged the hole to insert a trach tube.
Yeah. Well, I think. Well, there was also a lot of pressure on these people to try to wrap this up nice and tight and say that Lee Harvey Oswald was the shooter.
There was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this big thing about the CIA inventing the FBI? The FBI, well, inventing the term conspiracy theory was a CIA thing.
I think it was the CIA.
Yeah, and this was a couple of years after the assassination. There was a memo that went out where they were concerned about all these conspiracy theories that were coming out. And they used the term conspiracy theories, and then they said they should try to basically debunk them and make the people who spread them around look like conspiracy theorists, basically.
Right.
So that the theory is that the term conspiracy theory came from that particular memo. But that memo, they never actually encouraged people to use the term. But yeah, there was a huge concern from the CIA that they would lose the trust of the public if everybody started believing that it was a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
At least that's what they said. I mean, maybe there is a conspiracy and maybe they're just trying to cover it up. But
did you see the most recent dump of information on the Kennedy assassination that Jack Ruby had stated to people that before the day of the Kennedy assassination, keep an eye out today, there's going to be fireworks?
I didn't see that. Yeah,
those Jack Ruby, who eventually wound up shooting Lee Harvey Oswald in front of the police officers.
Yeah. But, something like that, there's no... he's dead, obviously, so you can't ask him what he actually meant. And things like that take on a special significance after an event.
True.
Whereas he could be just talking about, like, he was going to go visit his ex-wife or something, or he was going to go to the bar, or he was looking forward to shouting at the parade or whatever.
Right. Could have been nothing.
Yeah, people say things, and, after something happens, people go back and they look at everything that happened, and then they say, well, that sounds like something significant.
Right. Like
with the Vegas shooting, there was a woman walking around the crowd in the Vegas shooting saying, you're all going to die. This is what some people said. And this was like half an hour before the actual shooting itself. So people take that event, and then, since a lot of people did die, they think that this woman actually knew what was going to happen and she was trying to warn people.
Right.
But you also get crazy people wandering around saying things all the time, especially in Vegas.
Yeah, and the problem with "you're all going to die" is that that's a common one. Some guy was yelling that. We took pictures of him when we were in Vegas long before the shooting. It was a few months ago. We were we were in a car, and he was standing on the corner, and he had a stack of signs. I put it up on my Instagram. I know I did, because there was stacks of signs. He had not just one sign, but he had like a long totem pole of signs with all these different things, and I was taking photos of it, and the guy was yelling out, "Everyone's going to die." I mean, he was yelling it out, that, God's wrath and all this, crazy religious stuff.
That's a common thing for crazy people to shout.
Yes.
That's what they do shout.
It's not like this woman was saying specifically, someone is going to shoot everyone at this concert, get out of here, this is a dangerous area.
If she was trying to warn them, she would have been a bit more specific.
Yes, very specific, right? If she knew something. Do you find it? No? I know I put it up there because we were mocking it. Maybe I put it on my Instagram story and it went away. I don't think so, though. I think it's there from, I want to say it was at least 6 months ago. But we were mocking this guy because this guy's got a lot of fucking signs. Like, one sign's not enough. I go, this is the reason why Twitter only has 140 characters for motherfuckers like this.
I think I remember it was like July because it was like 120 degrees out too, wasn't it?
Yes, it was very hot.
Really
This goofy asshole had this giant stack of signs. So the back to the Kennedy thing.
Yeah.
What do you think happened? Do you think that Lee Harvey Oswald probably acted alone?
I think he probably acted alone. I think the physics of what happened is fairly consistent with the single shooter theory. Now, admittedly, the magic bullet is a bit strange, but I don't think it's out of the bounds of possibilities.
I do, because of the fact that the metal particles. There's more bullet fragments in Connolly's body than were missing from that almost pristine bullet. And even though the fact that it hit Connolly at the very end, if it went through all that flesh and it didn't hit any bone until it hit his wrist, then it would not have been compromised very much ballistically. It would still be going incredibly fast. It still would have smashed into that bone. It did enough to break his wrist, and it would have distorted the bullet. That's just what happens with bullets.
See, unfortunately, I don't really follow JFK conspiracy very much. And the reason I don't is that there are already, I think literally over 1,000 books on JFK.
I've read a few. I got into Case Closed. That was Vincent Bugliosi's book. Is that who it was? But I was like, this guy's got an agenda. It just didn't. There's many books that you could read about the Kennedy assassination, and some of them favor the conspiracy, and some of them favor the assassination. I think a lot of them have merit on both sides. One thing that drives me crazy was people say that you could never make that shot. That's fucking bullshit. That's bullshit. This is why I know it's bullshit, because it was only like a couple hundred yards.
Yeah.
Like a couple hundred yards, shooting at something the size of a person's head is easy.
What about Jesse Ventura trying to do the three shots, getting 3 shots off?
He didn't know what he was doing. Look, I mean, first of all, if you were used to that rifle and you practice that, someone said, oh, the scope was off. I think that's bullshit too. The reason why I think that's bullshit is because it's easy to knock a scope off. You have to have a direct chain of evidence between the time Lee Harvey Oswald had that scope shooting that rifle, the moment he shot that rifle, and then you have to hand it off to someone who checks the scope right then. Because if you drop a rifle, the scope goes off. Just drop it. I've done that before. I dropped a rifle once when I was hunting in Wisconsin, and my scope was off by 6 inches at 100 yards. Just dropping it. So the idea that he could have never made that shot because the scope was off. Scopes get adjusted. That's what happens when you drop a scope. They move. That's a whole thing about ballistics. You have to check them. You go to the range. You set up a lead sled. You lay the rifle down so it's perfectly stable. You squeeze off a shot. You use the binoculars. You find out where the shot hit on the target, and then you adjust the scope. They're adjustable. So the idea that his scope was no good is crazy. The idea that shot was too far to make, insane. It was I think it was less than 100 yards when they think he made the first shot, which is a chip shot. That's a shot that you would make without even a rest. Now, he's making this shot resting on the window, so he's perfectly steady. The idea that that was impossible is crazy. The idea that no one can do that in 3 shots, that's been disproven. Someone can do it. Someone who's really good at reloading and loading can do it. Just because Jesse Ventura couldn't do it, but Jesse's super conspiracy-minded.
Yes.
Like, he goes all in with the conspiracy theories.
That's the motivated reasoning part of things.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's doing it just for his show or because he really believes it.
I worked with the same people that did his show. The reason why I did Joe Rogan Questions Everything is they wanted me to take over Jesse's show after he was done, and I was uninterested.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm not that guy. I'm not like the I believe every conspiracy guy. I think people have a real weird vested interest in proving that things are a conspiracy. I'm interested in finding out what things really are, like legitimately what they really are.
Yeah.
And even if I'm wrong, like I'm not interested in reinforcing things I've already said. If I find out that what I said was wrong, I'm interested in repeating that I was wrong as many times as I can to get it out to as many people as I can.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Because I think it's important.
Yeah.
So this JFK thing, there's bullshit on both sides of it. But the idea that this guy who went over to Russia, married a Russian citizen, came back here, he was absolutely involved in some shady, weird shit with Cuba. He's a fucking weird guy. Lee Harvey Oswald was a weird guy. The idea that he was completely innocent, I'm not buying that either.
I don't buy the idea that it's proven that he acted entirely alone. It's entirely possible that there are other people who were like helping him or motivating him or giving him instructions even.
Yeah.
The thing I don't think is really proven is the additional shooter theory.
It's not proven. And there have been people that said they heard things from behind them. The problem with that is chaos. When you have gunshots, first of all, gunshots in an area like Dealey Plaza, the echoes ring out, and people claim to see things and hear things, and they even believe themselves. If you tell someone that you heard something in the bushes and then you run away, that person will say, I heard something in the bushes, and then other people will repeat it. It becomes the narrative, and it just gets real hard.
You can create memories for people.
Yes, you can.
You can even point to somebody and say there is somebody there, and they'll think there's somebody there later because the brain is so chaotically working, it forms memories in a very weird way.
Especially when it comes to something that's so significant, like the president getting shot or any sort of violent thing. Now, this is something that gets repeated ad nauseum about 9/11. It's something that people point to where they think that when the planes hit those buildings, that there was detonations that caused Tower 1 and Tower 2 to fall. There's no way they would have fallen like that. Mm-hmm. Like when people say, no, they heard things in the buildings, they heard explosions. People always say shit like that. And on top of that, if you're dealing with a building collapsing like that, you're going to hear a lot of crazy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, there are going to be explosions. Things are falling. There were people falling off the buildings.
Which goes to Tower 7. That's another one that keeps coming up. See if you can find the video, Jamie. There's the video that shows what really happened in Tower 7. There's a guy who was a conspiracy guy. He was really deep into conspiracies. And then the more he started looking into Tower 7, the more he realized that everyone is just showing the very final video where Tower 7 collapses like a controlled demolition. And it looks exactly like a controlled demolition. However, if you find the full video, you see that the interior had collapsed moments before, like quite a bit before.
Edward Current, I think, is the guy who did that video.
I think that's exactly who it is. See if you can find that gentleman's video. But he shows how the top of it, you could see the top of Tower 7 give in, which is consistent with this idea that the diesel fuel that they had in the basement had created, wasn't it like diesel tanks?
Yeah, that was an early theory of the diesel fuel, that was actually fueling the fire, but they never found any evidence that actually the diesel fuel contributed to the fires. It was just regular office fires, which is what everybody finds so suspicious.
So the diesel never caught fire? Is that what they're saying?
They don't know. It might have been after the collapse. I think they recovered one of the tanks with some diesel still in it.
So, series of diesel, likely fed by a series of diesel generators located in the lower floors, which is where most of the fires were concentrated. So at least one of the diesel tanks didn't light up? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The theory, like NIST theory, is that the diesel had nothing to do with it.
Okay. So NIST, which if you are a conspiracy theory person, they get really angry when you bring up NIST.
Because they're the government.
The government, man. So
I think this is an older video.
yeah, this isn't the video, Jamie.
Yeah.
There's one by
Edward Current.
Yeah. And what it does is it shows the top of the building cave in first, quite a bit before the rest of the building. So this idea that it all cave in like a controlled demolition because they detonated all those things. So, is that Edward Current?
Yeah, I don't gotta find a good spot of the video to show it. So
okay.
Video, you know.
Yeah. So what happened? What they think was that the fire. That's a shitty design of a building, and the fire caused internal damage to all of the floors.
Well, first of all, you see there the World Trade Center 1 fell basically against the side of 7.
Yeah, it was
that
pretty
entire
close.
back of the building was all kind of like all the windows were broken on the back side. There was one column in the middle of the back that was missing, and a big chunk of the lower west side was kind of gouged out.
Right. So this idea that it was just a fire.
Yeah, it wasn't just a fire.
Yeah.
The fire is what triggered the collapse eventually, but the fact that all the windows were missing from the south side contributed a lot to that because you got a lot of wind flow through.
See if he's got the I don't know, maybe this is a bit bad thing to do while you're actually doing the show. So this is what the idea is. The NIST computer models that all these floors had collapsed
Inside
and then
the
the outside
building.
collapsed too.
Yeah.
But what this guy, Edward Current, had showed in his video, I think it was him, was he showed that the top part,
the penthouse.
the top penthouse had collapsed first. There it is. So if you see the penthouse collapsing.
So you're syncing it up there with the two videos, the simulation.
So it's sitting up there, and then boom, you see it collapse.
And some windows breaking further down.
Exactly. And that's something that no one ever shows. And then it gives in.
Right.
So this is not a quick thing like a controlled demolition. All those windows giving in is indicative of all those floors collapsing probably more than it is the idea of, the people that want to see conspiracy think that those bombs were going off there and that as those detonations or explosions were going off, that's what caused all those floors to collapse on top of each other.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was talking about with the core beliefs of the conspiracy theories with 9/11. This fact that World Trade Center 7 looks like a controlled demolition is this core belief. But when you actually get into something and describe what's actually happening, you have to go to a much more complicated conspiracy theory and a much more complicated way of looking at what actually happened. And now they're trying to do a complicated study of World Trade Center 7 at the University of Alaska. This is something paid for by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. They're trying to actually figure out how they can reconcile controlled demolition with the fact that it collapsed the way it did.
Right.
So they're trying to actually explain something which doesn't really need explaining because the explanation has been done by NIST already.
So what they're trying to do is find something that reinforces their initial idea instead of just look at the facts itself saying, you look at the top of the penthouse collapsing, that's not indicative of a controlled demolition. That's indicative of the model that NIST described, which is a slow burn inside, extremely hot, deterioration of all the internal structure. Everything starts to collapse inside, and then the outside collapses too.
Yeah, well, some of them will say that is actually how controlled demolitions are done. You blow up the interior of the building first, and then you blow up the exterior of the building. But the problem is that none of the exterior columns were cut. There was no explosion seen on the exterior columns. And if you look at the World Trade Center 1 and 2 coming down, you can kind of imagine there are explosions going all the way down because there's things that look like explosions from the falling floors. But in 7, you just see the building kind of crumple down. So they have to kind of explain that. So they come up with this study that they funded. It's cost them like nearly $400,000. And they're trying to come up with an explanation that doesn't involve fire. So they're saying, like, if it was controlled demolition, then the way they would have done it is blowing up these interior columns, and it would have pulled in the exterior and collapsed the way we see in the video. And I think that some of them say that the penthouse thing was a separate thing because they wanted to have a neat demolition. So they first of all blew up a few floors just underneath the penthouse, so it neatly collapsed inside the building, and then they blew up some floors at the bottom, so it all fell in on itself without damaging the surrounding buildings too much. So they've got this complex theory.
And it's based on confirmation bias. It's based on confirming this idea that this is a controlled demolition, not on examining the whole thing as it is and going, okay, is it possible that the NIST model is correct and that these look, the thing that I bring up to people all the time when they want to talk about conspiracies, there's a real conspiracy in 9/11, and that's the fact that it happened. The fact that they did fly planes into buildings, that's a conspiracy, and they pulled it off.
Yeah.
That actually did happen. People don't want that to be it. They want it to be a much broader conspiracy involving world governments that are trying to close in on, all our rights, and this is the way to do it. And
Yeah, it's proportionality. People want something to be in proportion to the size of the event.
Right.
And they think just like a bunch of Arabs with knives isn't a big enough cause. So they think that it has to be something more significant. And even like with the physics of it, they think the plane flew into the building and it didn't collapse. So why would it collapse? Some people don't think that the plane would even have
That's my
gone in the
favorite
hole.
one.
They think it would have bounced off.
what? Who the fuck thinks that?
Or some of them think that the tower would have been knocked over.
Really?
Yeah. But these are people who have really no conception whatsoever of physics. And it's a minority of people. But you'll find people who don't understand how aluminum can cut through steel. The columns of the exterior of the World Trade Center were made of steel, very
Right.
strong steel, and planes are made of mostly aluminum. So they don't understand how a plane made of aluminum, which is soft, can go through steel, which is very hard and strong. And the example I always give to them is the ping pong ball going through a ping pong paddle. If you make it go fast enough, this is something I think Mythbusters do and various other people have done. You send a regular ping pong ball at 500 miles an hour into a ping pong paddle, and it just goes straight through it, leaves a ping pong ball hole in the middle of it. And that's just what happened on 9/11. The planes were going at 500 miles an hour.
I didn't know
so
you could do that with a ping pong ball.
You can.
Wow. That makes sense. It's just, well, for the planes, too, the amount of mass you're dealing with, too, and the speed. It's from 500 miles an hour.
Yeah, and it doesn't even need to be relatively that much mass.
Yeah.
You think a ping pong ball, it weighs
Right,
like
nothing.
1 gram, and a paddle weighs like 200 grams or something. So, and you wouldn't think, you've seen ping pong paddles. They're this laminated wood and rubber, and you've got this flimsy little ball. How on earth is that going to go through that? So it's unintuitive.
Right.
So you can understand how people would be confused about why the planes left these little roadrunner holes.
See if you can find that. You got the Mythbusters thing? I want to see that. Oh, here it is. Wow.
Well, that was the hole.
So they have some crazy air cannon. Yep.
Yeah.
Blows all. Okay. Here's the problem with that, though. They're doing that right in front of that.
They have to though with the ping pong ball because it would slow down. But
I understand, but you're also dealing with the actual air.
yeah, but it's
But it is the ping pong
It
ball
is the
that
ping
does
pong
it.
ball that
You can
does
see
it.
it in slow motion.
yeah.
Because what I was going to bring up was a guy killed himself once accidentally on a movie set because he took an unloaded gun
Remember
and he shot it into his temple and it blew his
Blanks.
brains out. Yeah, it was blank.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was a blank didn't stop that air from blowing through. There's a thing that people do when they hunt in Alaska. And in incredibly moist climates and places where there's a lot of dirt and debris, they will put tape over the top of the rifle, over the end of the barrel where the bullet comes over. Or they even use a condom. And it has no effect whatsoever on the accuracy of the bullet because the air coming out of the rifle
Right.
barrel from the explosion blows that tape out before the bullet even gets to it.
Yeah. Yeah. But the only reason they have to have that thing right at the end of the barrel is the ping pong ball would slow down so
Yeah, no, it makes
rapidly
sense.
in the air because it's so light. But,
Right.
If you shot something a little bit heavier but still pretty small, it will go through it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
But then you think you got to scale it up. Like, imagine like a beer barrel made out of steel or aluminum. It's weighs like 100 pounds or whatever when it's full. And you imagine that slamming into something at 500
Right.
miles an hour. If a ping pong ball can do something at 500 miles an hour, a beer barrel at 500 miles an hour can do an awful amount of damage.
Probably go right through a building.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you scale up from like a beer barrel to a 200-ton plane.
Yeah.
And 200 tons hitting something at 500 miles an hour. It doesn't matter that it's it's made of aluminum. It's
Yeah.
still 200 tons of something. If it was just a big bag of water hitting something at 500 miles an hour, it would still make a hole in the side of the building.
I think this is a problem with a lot of these theories is that a lot of the people that are involved in these theories are either not educated in what they're talking about because there are some various nuances to things like this ping pong ball trick, or they don't want to be. Like, they don't want to look at anything that takes away from this conspiracy. They don't want to look at anything that debunks or disproves. They just want confirmation of their initial idea that this is some big, grand conspiracy, that someone is in on it and it's happening right before our eyes.
Yeah, it's quite hard to even get one point past a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, if someone starts out with that theory that, you know, aluminum cannot cut steel, then that just becomes like, you know, the gatekeeping obstacle that you have to get past. If you can't disprove that one thing, nothing else matters really for them, because, you know, the plane couldn't have entered the building, therefore everything is a conspiracy. So you kind of have to address these things.
Yeah, you have to, and it's important for people before they decide that this is, you know, that the government's spraying things in the sky, or that the world is flat, or whatever these things are. It's important to look at all the evidence. These YouTube videos, one of the real problems with them is that they get to play out without being interrupted, much like a podcast, unfortunately. But they get to have these grand statements without anyone who's an expert stepping in and stopping them and saying, well, that's not true, and here's why it's not true, and here's why you can prove that it's not true, which would just derail most of these conspiracy theories really quickly.
Yeah, and that's kind of the brainwashing aspect of these videos. People watch these 3-hour videos.
Yeah.
It kind of surprised me at first. I was surprised that people would, you know, listen to a 3-hour podcast. But, you know, once you get going in something, you know, the first time I was on your podcast, the time went by like nothing.
Yeah.
And if you're into something and you get sucked into it, and you've got this really interesting theory, and it's like all these revelations, like, oh my God, I'm getting the real skinny on the world.
The ice wall.
Yeah, you just get sucked in, and then when it's finished, you're on kind of a dopamine high, and you want to do more.
And you also feel like you're in on something that people don't know, and you want to tell them about it.
Oh yeah.
And I've been there. I've always tell people the dumbest one I ever believed in was those stupid tubes that fly through the air.
Rods. Yeah.
I was hook, line, and sinker. I would go outside and I would try to find those things streaking across the sky. What it was that there was a video that was made called Roswell Rods, and it was trying to say that there was these bugs-like things that looked like jellyfish that were flying through the air so fast the naked eye couldn't see them, but they would catch them on video cameras. And then finally someone figured it out, that what it really was you could have an HD camera right next to a standard definition camera, and see those things flying across the sky. It's just a video artifact. When the camera cannot pick up those bugs, it elongates them and streaks them across the camera.
Motion blur.
Yeah, it's motion blur. And this guy came to one of my UFC Q&As once, and he waited in line and yelled out, "You're wrong about the rods. The rods are real. I can prove it." Silly fella. But that was a Monster Quest had proven that on television. They'd set up 2 cameras.
Yeah, but it's so hard when it's actually been proven, and you've got this conclusive proof, and yet there are still loads and loads of people who believe in rods and
look how it looks.
orbs.
Look how he was describing that it looks.
Yeah, it's like some kind of alien jellyfish.
That's so fast. It flies through the air faster than you can see. Yeah, I mean, the problem is these guys have a vested interest in it being real.
He's motivated, and not necessarily by money. They're just motivated because once they believe something, they feel like they're privy to this special knowledge. And it's just going to be such a letdown if they're wrong.
I think it's that and money. I mean, he sold a bunch of videos. I bought them. I bought 2 of those bitches.
Well, I always try to start out with the assumption that people are not, they're basically good people, and they're not trying to make money.
Right. Well, I think they also get caught up in the business of whatever it is. You know, if you're in the UFO business and then someone comes along and shuts down your business, you're going to try to, let me they're not going to look at it objectively. They're going to go, I want to keep my business alive. I want to protect my business.
Yeah, well, it's like architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. They're like a $500,000 a year business. They're taking between $400,000 and $800,000 a year, and the president of the architects and engineers, he gets paid a salary of like $85,000 a year, and he gets his expenses paid. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in what he's doing. He, I'm sure, started out as like a hardcore believer in 9/11 truth, but over the last 10 years, this has become his life and his livelihood. So even if he really believes it, he still has this additional level of motivation to not disprove things.
How many people are in architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth?
Well, it depends how you count it. Like they say they have like thousands of architects and engineers actually signing the petition. I think they have like maybe a few hundred working structural engineers.
And what do you think of their take on it?
Their take is kind of like the standard of 9/11 truth. They think that it's controlled demolition, and they think they have all this evidence for controlled demolition, but it's not very good evidence. It's one of the experts is a high school physics teacher, and he's probably fairly good at high school physics, but he just makes some very simple mistakes about physics of the falling towers, and they repeat this on their website unquestioningly. There's another guy who's like the expert on the nanothermite residue that was found. They think that these red and gray specks of what looks like paint and rust was actually nanothermite. Since he's now like an expert on their site, he gets to say whatever he likes, and he's got this one theory about how the bits of steel that flew out of the building had these nanothermite rockets attached to them, which is why they were leaving these trails of smoke behind when they fell down. And these are things that are just pretty ridiculous, and you can kind of debunk them with physics, but they'll have none of it because they've got their experts saying something. And you can't deny the fact that you can't debunk their experts because they're experts. Why would you know more about a high school physics teacher about physics? Why would you know more about nanothermite than this guy who's an expert in nanothermite?
Mm-hmm.
So they've got all this supposed expertise making these mistakes about 9/11. Like the president has this ridiculous demonstration that he does where he holds up two cardboard boxes. And underneath one of them, there's empty space, and underneath the other one, there's a tower. And he drops them, and this one falls to the ground, and this one bounces off the cardboard box. And he's basically saying this is what should have happened. This upper portion should have stopped on the way down. And he's using these cardboard boxes as a demonstration. But they're ridiculous oversimplifications of what actually happened.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the engineers' take on things, from the architects and engineers. I really didn't bother getting into it too much. But I just do know that it's several hundred people, if not over 1,000, and they're all over the world. But how many people have studied it that disagree with them? Like how many and how good are the architects and engineers that are in there's a lot of architects and a lot of engineers in this world.
Yeah, they recently tried to get a motion passed at the American Institute of Architects, which was basically a reopen World Trade Center 7. And they went to the convention and they stood up and they gave their speeches and gave all their evidence about why the Building 7 investigation should have been reopened, and they took a vote, and I think it was about something like 97 to 3% against doing this. So of the architects who were actually there, these professional architects, 97%, I can't remember the exact figures, but it's around that, voted against this. So even though there's thousands, even though there are thousands of signatures to the AE 9/11 petition who are actually architects, when you actually look at the actual millions of architects that are out there in the world, it's a very small fraction of that.
Right, but how many of those millions have studied it? That's the real problem. I would like to see someone who's like a real legitimate top of the food chain architect from the debunking side view it from someone who is absolutely all in as a conspiracy.
Lots of people have done various studies on 9/11, the collapses of the building. There was a book by a guy from London, I think he's called Feng Fu, a Chinese guy from London, who wrote a book on progressive collapses in large buildings, came out last year, 2016, and it discusses like why Building 7 collapsed, why the World Trade Center towers collapsed, amongst a whole bunch of other buildings, why which either collapsed or didn't. So there are lots of people who do actually study it. And within AE 9/11, architects and engineers for 9/11, the vast majority of them have not studied it. If you look at their position statements, everybody who joins it like writes a little statement which goes on the website. They'll say things like, "I watched loose change and that opened my eyes,"
Right.
or "It looked weird to me." That's like the real common thing. When I saw the towers fall, I knew it wasn't it wasn't a regular collapse.
It looked weird to me. Is my favorite one.
It did, but it did look weird. It looked weird to me.
Yeah.
So,
of course.
An architect saying it looked weird to them. It looked weird to everybody.
Right.
And no one had seen anything like that before. It was unprecedented. The Saturn V rocket taking off looks weird because it hadn't happened before.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that look weird. What other things do you think that you and I disagree on?
I think maybe the Morgellons thing. You are more prone to think that it's a real thing because you went to the Morgellons conference.
Not that it's a real thing, that there's real fibers growing out of people, but that there's neurotoxic. This is what I got from a doctor. The doctor who had Morgellons, who was at the clinic, who's a very reasonable guy.
William Harvey, I think his name is.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
He has Lyme disease. And he said the vast majority of the people that have Morgellons also have Lyme disease.
Right.
And he believes that there is a neurotoxic quality to Lyme disease that affects the way you see things and even causes hallucinations. And he witnessed it himself. He said, I hallucinated and saw something crawling across the surface of my eyeball in the mirror, but it wasn't a real thing. I couldn't see it after, I looked at it again. It was gone, but I did see it for a moment. And he's convinced that Lyme disease, when you catch Lyme disease, you're not necessarily catching. It's not like, you have Tylenol, something that's isolated. It's very specific. When you get Tylenol, you're getting Tylenol. He's like, when you get bit by a tick that has Lyme disease, you could get a host of pathogens. Mm-hmm. And there's, what tests positive for Lyme disease. It's very tricky to find someone to.
But this doctor, this one guy, William Harvey, like he's a guy who thinks he has Morgellons, or he thinks he has chronic Lyme.
Well, he definitely has chronic Lyme, and he thinks that what Morgellons is a side effect of chronic Lyme, where people start thinking there's fibers growing out of their skin,
right? And
so they think that. Fibers that come from their clothes or carpets, they get stuck to someplace they've been itching because they open up a wound, and that they start misinterpreting that as being something that's grown out of their skin.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that part of it.
Yeah, but that's what he thinks.
Yeah, so really he's not really a Morgellons guy, he's a chronic Lyme guy.
Yes, he is. He's a Morgellons guy in the fact that he has seen the hallucinations, but because of the fact that he's a doctor and scientifically minded, he believes that he's watching his own mind play tricks on him, and he thinks there's neurotoxic qualities to whatever the pathogens that are in Lyme disease are.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess I don't disagree with you too much then. I would disagree with you, I think, on chronic Lyme, but I think you probably know more about it than I do. From what I've seen, like most doctors don't think chronic Lyme is a real thing.
It depends on how long you have it for before you get it treated. That's the real issue.
There's post-Lyme syndrome and chronic Lyme, which some people think there's a chronic infection, and other people think there's just chronic effects, like left over from having Lyme disease for a long time.
I think there's a lot of variabilities. I think we'd probably have to really consult an actual Lyme disease doctor on this.
Not my area of expertise.
Nor mine. But I do have friends that have gotten Lyme disease. And I know some people that are suffering from it to this day that have like real terrible issues with it. My friend Jim Miller, who's a fighter in the UFC, it's come and go with him in a terrible way. It greatly affects his joints, and he's had to take various medications to try to get a handle on it. It depends, I think, on the person. There's a lot of variables. Depends on the person. Depends on how quickly they detect the Lyme disease. My friend brought his son to the doctor. His son had Lyme disease. He brought his son to the doctor. The doctor didn't believe he had Lyme disease because that the bullseye ring around the bite had gone away, which does sometimes happen. They said, nah, it's probably nothing. And then the kid developed Bell's palsy.
Right.
And then they said, okay, this is serious. And then they realized that he actually does have Lyme disease. And he was pretty pissed that the doctor didn't take him seriously. He had the Lyme disease as well. He had to go on some serious intravenous antibiotics for months.
Right.
It was like really heavy stuff.
So he did actually have Lyme disease.
He had Lyme disease, and it devastated him for months.
Yeah.
For months, he wasn't the same.
I think a problem with a lot of these medical conditions is that they're clinical diagnoses, which means that they're diagnosed not with tests that you can do of blood and things like that, but it's based on the symptoms.
Yes.
And a lot of the times people, they like to attribute their problems to something and give it a name. So we've got a lot of things now like fibromyalgia, where we can't do a blood test usually for something like fibromyalgia. You have elevated immune responses and things like that, but you can't say for sure this is fibromyalgia. It could be just a symptom of something else. But people like to put a name on things. So if people they're getting aches and pains or whatever, they say it's fibromyalgia. They convince themselves it's fibromyalgia. With the
Self-diagnosis.
Yeah, and with Morgellons, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
People get old. Your joints start to ache, your hair starts to fall out, and your eyes start to, you're losing your vision, your focus. And people think, what's wrong with me? And they don't realize they're just getting old. And they look it up and they think they have Morgellons, or they think they have chronic Lyme. People just, if they're getting ill for some reason, they like to attribute their chronic condition to something. So they might tag on to a particular thing like chronic Lyme if they got bit by a tick, last summer, and then this summer now they have all these problems. They might self-diagnose as having chronic Lyme.
It is possible, but you do realize there's a tremendous amount of Lyme disease in the Northeast in particular.
Oh yeah, Lyme disease is a very real thing.
It's horrible condition. Yeah. And the people that do get it, they're pretty uniform in the fact that it sucks. It's terrible, and it's really scary because it really didn't kind of exist just a few hundred years ago. I don't know where it came from.
Yeah, it just kind of, I don't know.
Or maybe they didn't know what it was. People got it and no one had any idea what it was.
Yeah, it could be. It was discovered in that village, Lyme Village, which is what it's named after. But that reminds me of the Cuban embassy thing with the sonic weapons.
Yeah, what do you think about that thing?
I think I don't think there is any sonic weapon.
Why do you think that?
Because it's the same type of thing. People are reporting a bunch of symptoms. They haven't really done any physical diagnosis of people. People were getting ill. People were reporting hearing noises. But the noises kind of sound like cicadas. And so it could have been like one guy wakes up in the middle of the night, there's a cicada in his room, jumps out of bed, cicada goes quiet. And have you ever tried tracking a cicada in your yard? You get close to them and they go quiet, so you got to start moving. So he gets back into bed, cicada starts buzzing again. So this happens to one guy, say. He tells this story to someone. Maybe he gets ill later for some unrelated thing. And other people say, well, I don't feel very well either. And then at some point, people kind of make a false connection, and they start thinking that something actually happened. And so they start asking people, how are you feeling? Are you feeling all right? How's your hearing? And people say, well, my hearing's not as good as it used to be. My eyesight's not as good as it used to be. I've been having these balance problems. But it's just people just having normal life problems. They're getting old, or they've had food sickness, or they've moved away.
Pull up evidence of sonic weapon in Cuba, because I don't agree with you on this one. The U.S. releases recordings of sonic weapon attack used against diplomats in Cuba. Play this.
It sounds a bit like a cicada to me.
At least 22 people have been hurt by the mysterious high-pitched sound.
Have they, though? Have they? 22 people are sick. They've talked to their doctors and they've told them about the symptoms that they're having.
Well,
they've diagnosed people with brain damage, but it's a clinical diagnosis.
Well, you know that they have sonic weapons, right?
Yeah,
that
they have
sonic weapons is something that have been researched real. And it's real.
Yeah.
And you don't think it's entirely possible that this is a sonic weapon?
I don't see any evidence that it's a sonic weapon.
Have you looked into this a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to me that if they're broadcasting it, and this is something that the government's talking about it, they're investigating it, all these different people are investigating it. It seems like there's enough evidence that they're concerned.
Yeah, but everyone's reporting different things.
Stressful
Everyone's
conditions,
got
not
different
sonic
health.
weapon. Sickened U.S. diplomats. Cuba panel asserts. Yeah, but you can't listen to that. They're like, you just got sick, man.
I think they're right. And Cuba, like, yeah, sure, they've got an interest in figuring it out because they don't want to get the finger.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's probably not Cuba doing it if it was somebody. But,
Look at this. After a 9-month probe hampered by a lack of access to medical records, a panel of Cuban scientists today declared U.S. diplomats here likely suffered a collective psychogenic disorder. Not a deliberate health
mass
attack.
hysteria, essentially.
So see what evidence there is that is pro.
I typed in evidence, and this is this is what came up.
Yeah, this is
That's
a new
it?
thing.
This is- it says there's not
The
enough
latest thing is that
Yeah, but see if there's any other articles that contradict this. 'cause I know.
there is a later thing than this where there's been, they say the detected changes in the white matter of the brain of some people, which is a bit vague. And they
the
don't.
white matter of the brain.
Yeah, that's
What are they using? fMRI? What are they using to find the?
I don't know how they do it, but
They can't even figure out CTE in players.
yeah, it's but who knows what caused this and how many people actually had it? You know, if one guy has changes in the white matter of his brain, who knows what that's actually due to?
Doctors treating victims of the attack, though, have found visible, perceptible damage to the patient's brains, marking the first solid evidence that sophisticated weapon described by embassy staff is entirely real, the Associated Press reports.
Yeah. Says the Associated Press based on what? Based on someone at the State Department saying we have found some damage somewhere. You know, the State Department is covering their ass. The State Department expelled Cuban diplomats because of this.
They did?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Cuban diplomats are, man, we did nothing.
Yeah.
We did nothing, man. Scroll back up there, please. Scroll back up to the top.
They took some Americans away from the embassy because they were sick. And so they said the Cubans didn't protect the Americans well enough, so you're going to have to send 6 people back as well.
See, it says the State Department, the FBI officials, it's so unlike anything the State Department and the FBI officials have ever seen that the Cuban government's claim the high-pitched whirring sounds reported by the U.S. Embassy staff are just cicadas seems almost plausible. Click on that link that says they're just cicadas up at the top.
That'd be the same one we just saw, I think.
Is that it?
Yeah. They're playing the noise.
This is a similar attack happened to somebody else in Uzbekistan.
Is that Bush?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Old school Bush. Why do they have a picture of him?
He's being attacked by a
It's my
cicada.
idea. I did it all. Yeah. It's a weird sound for sure, but I would think that something that would be that could damage you would be a frequency that would be
Audible?
yeah.
Well, some of them reported hearing things. But, you know, some people didn't report hearing things. Some people had a high-pitched whine that disappeared. Some people had a long-lasting rumbling noise. Some
The
people
attacks
had
might not be sonic at
vision
all.
changes, all kinds of different, you know, just the irregular Morgellons, chronic fatigue, getting old type symptoms.
So you think that someone started talking about this being an issue, that they're being attacked, and everybody started freaking out?
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah, and I think probably something happened, like, you know, some guy heard something and jumped out of bed and it stopped, and then got back into bed and it started again, and someone else had something similar happened.
That's funny because if you were in Cuba and they didn't want you there, and you heard weird noises, you're like, God damn it, they're attacking me with a sound ray.
And people are being harassed in Cuba. Like, if you work at the American embassy, you get harassed.
New sonic attack against American diplomats suggests Russian involvement. Bum, bum, bum. The Russians did it through Twitter bots. When you click on the Twitter bots, they send sound through your earbuds.
Yeah, people are saying, like, you know, linking the cicadas causing the hearing loss. But no one's actually saying the cicadas are causing people to lose their hearing. They're just saying that, you know, people sometimes get reductions in their hearing as they get older. And maybe they're noticing it because they're focusing on it so much.
Right.
That's what happens with all these diseases. People think, I'm sick, and then they focus on something. Like, if you feel like you're itching a bit and you think you've got some kind of weird pathogen under your skin, you're just going to itch more and more, and you're going to feel more and more itching.
Right.
So if people weren't really paying attention, like, you know, I have, like, mild tinnitus, like ringing in the ears.
From video games or something?
I don't know.
Headphones? They say you get that from...
Yeah, it could be. It's just, but, you know, people get it as they get older for no reason. Some people, you know, going to loud concerts or whatever.
Right.
most of the time I don't even think about it. I might have never even noticed it. But if I stop and listen to my, what's going on in my ears, I can hear this tinnitus, this noise in my ear very, very, very quietly. So if someone said, "Oh, I think we're being bombarded by sonic weapons," like, can you hear any like ringing in your ear or anything like that? And then you go quiet and you listen, and you start noticing these things.
Right. That makes sense. People are very susceptible. Psychosomatic illnesses are absolutely very real.
And there's a thing called sick building syndrome, which is possibly a real thing and possibly a psychogenic thing. But a lot of people think that sick building syndrome, a lot of the times when it happens, it's like when lots of people working in the same place get similar symptoms. It's happening because of this mass psychogenic illness. One person says, "I feel sick," and everyone kind of assumes it's something in the environment around them that's causing that. And so they kind of feel sick as well.
There's a disease that I had heard of. Someone was talking about this once called allophrenia, I believe. And that it's when people go to visit people who have schizophrenia, if they hang out with those people, they start developing very bizarre behavior of their own. And sometimes they have to be monitored.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, we all know that some people are way more susceptible to suggestion, way more susceptible to Have you ever been hypnotized?
No, I haven't.
I have. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't be hypnotizable, but
I think
everybody thinks that, apparently.
Yeah, I thought that too, but I did it with a friend. My friend Vinny Shorman did it to me, so I trusted him, and I just and he's a registered licensed hypnotist, and he works with a lot of athletes, a lot of fighters in particular, and basically just puts you in a very bizarre state of mind, but you're aware of it the whole time. It's not like some Manchurian Candidate thing where they're going to wake up, Mick. Now you're an assassin for the government, and you like run out the door in your underwear like Captain Underpants. Do you know what Captain Underpants is? Do you have kids?
No, but I do know who Captain Underpants is.
Yeah, my kids love Captain Underpants.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me I should try hypnotizing my wife.
To do what?
He didn't specify exactly. He says it's the way he keeps his relationship going. Is by
hypnotizes her?
Yeah, like every couple of nights he hypnotizes his wife and just I don't know exactly what happens exactly. He didn't really specify, but he highly recommended hypnotizing my wife.
Wow, that guy sounds like a creep. He's doing some weird shit to his wife.
He's a nice guy, but
maybe not when he's got that stopwatch hanging from the string. It was always a watch, right? Follow the watch very carefully.
Yes.
You're getting sleepy. Yeah, that's real. Hypnosis is real. I was wondering. I was like, what is this like? Is this bullshit? But it really does put you in a very unusual state. And when you get out of it, you can go through a lot of stuff that you have like maybe cluttering around inside your mind and reorganize after a hypnotic session. It's pretty interesting. There's a reason why people use it for like, quitting smoking and things along those lines.
Yeah, well, it just shows how malleable the human brain is.
Yeah.
And, it goes back to that whole thing with being brainwashed by YouTube. People make documentaries in a way to hypnotize people.
Yeah.
They structure it in a way that you get these images coming at you and these ideas and this reinforcement of things in a way that will actually just kind of embed this idea in your brain without you even really realizing it.
Yeah, and they'll say things like, "You are being lied to."
Yeah.
The thing that kills me, too, is that they use oftentimes a hypnotic voice. Like that Eric Dubé guy who does those Flat Earth videos, he talks in a very hypnotic manner. It's like very calm and...
Yes. I think some of the 9/11 videos do that as well. They've got this nice woman dictating it. And it's like,
they get you.
The buildings could not possibly have fallen the way they did. Physics proves it.
It looks like we're going to have Eric Dubé, he said he's agreed to do it, talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
What?
Yes. He's going to Skype in from Thailand or wherever the fuck he is.
Yeah, I think it's in Thailand.
I don't know how he gets there with the flat earth. How do you get there?
That's still in the northern hemisphere, I think, Thailand.
Scoop over there, shoot over there and avoid the ice wall. But he doesn't believe in dinosaurs either.
Yeah, he's kind of a crazy guy.
No way, you think? He doesn't believe in... I don't know if he believes in satellites, but I don't think he believes in nuclear bombs
He's
either.
He's a bit of a anti-Semite as well, I think.
Is he?
Yeah, that's the whole kind of...
that's unfortunate.
Subculture in the movement of... Flat
Earths?
Yeah, Nazis type people.
Well,
Because of the conspiracy theory goes back to, the Rothschilds running the world.
Right.
And so they think it's these, this certain sect of the Jewish race who are actually in control of everything, and these are the people who are stopping you from.
The Eric Dubé is not me saying this. I have no knowledge whether or not you're anti-Semite.
Well, I think
so don't chicken out on this.
It's pretty easy to verify. He's got like a bunch of videos like explaining his position on it.
Well, my favorite thing is that he's my friend Eddie Bravo is kind of buying into some of his shit, which tortures me to no end. But Eddie is one of the greatest jiu-jitsu coaches on planet Earth. I mean, he's an amazing jiu-jitsu coach and jiu-jitsu competitor. And one of Eric Dubé's biggest videos is about how jiu-jitsu is bullshit. It just shows you. Isn't it about that? It's like about Wing Chun Kung Fu defeats jiu-jitsu, which is, by the way, not true. Don't try it. Unless you're like way bigger and the guy sucks at jiu-jitsu.
You should get those guys in a room together and they can just fight it out.
Yeah, I don't think so. They would just talk about conspiracies to the end of time. Eddie loves conspiracies.
I would like to talk to Eddie.
We could do that. But it would be a lot of screaming. Might have to get you some earplugs here. Tinnitus would kick in.
It's interesting because he knows so much about them all.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he's really interested.
He just confuses me. I'm like, how much time do you have? Where do you have the time for this?
Yeah, he's spouting off this advanced physics references like Michelson-Morley and Airy's failure and things like that. And
those are the flat Earth things.
Yeah, the science experiments that supposedly proved the Earth wasn't moving.
That one's hilarious to me because when I first brought it up to Eddie, Jamie pulled this up and sent it to me the other day. That I first brought it up to Eddie from like 8 years ago on the podcast, one of the really early podcasts when we still did it in my house on a couch. And he's like, what's the most ridiculous conspiracy theory you heard? And I said, flat Earth. And he's like, no, people don't believe the Earth is flat. So he went from that to, I don't think he's 100% convinced that it's flat, but he's definitely willing to listen.
He's down the rabbit hole. He got sucked in.
He loves it.
And it's probably like a lot of it is just from him watching endless YouTube videos.
It's 100% what it is. Here it is right here.
What's the worst conspiracy theory? Like the worst one?
Flat Earth. There's people that believe the Earth is flat. To the young Earth, that's another bad one.
No. Like today, people don't believe it's flat.
Yes, young Earth? Young Earth. Yeah. That's a big percentage of the Christian population. I went with young Earth there for some fucking stranger. We were all baked. So I probably, unfortunately, but that was when he found out about flat Earth for me. And that was...
You started him down the rabbit hole.
1,000 episodes ago.
What episode was that?
54.
So that was probably 2010.
Yeah, it was first year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the flat Earth was even that big on the internet back then.
Dude, I'm ahead of the curve, baby.
You're responsible for this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, he and I used to watch UFO things forever, but he got off a UFO. See, he goes in waves, right? Eddie goes in waves. Like, we were both, like, really into UFOs, and in particular, Zecharia Sitchin. That was the big one. Do you know who Zecharia Sitchin is?
I think you talked about him last time.
He's the Sumerian text guy. He wrote the reason why 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is named 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. I actually came up with the name, and one of the reasons why I came up with the name is because we were talking about Zecharia Sitchin. And the idea is that this came from another planet. We actually came up with the name before Pluto had been changed from, they had decided as a planetoid.
They downgraded it.
So we decided that this jiu-jitsu was coming from another planet, like out there where the Anunnaki live. But it was based on Zecharia Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet. And his book was all about planet Nibiru, and that the Sumerian texts were, when you decipher them correctly, they all describe this ancient race that came from this other planet that has this elliptical orbit that comes in between Earth and the Mars and Jupiter. Somewhere it comes near Earth every 3,600 years, and that this group of beings called the Anunnaki created human beings by coming down here and taking them and taking lower primates and injecting their DNA into them and blah blah blah. We were balls deep into that. That was a big one.
Yeah, that Anunnaki type thing, like the ancient aliens, is like something that's really at the far end of the conspiracy spectrum. But you still get people who are like, chemtrail believers who believe it. Like one of the guys you interviewed, Scott Stevens, There's a meteorologist.
Yes.
Yeah, he was like into like
He believed chemtrails 100%.
yeah, but he also believed in aliens and
Did he?
that type of
Yeah.
Anunnaki, like and
Well,
angels
I
and
don't
things.
disbelieve in aliens. What I disbelieve is people that are in contact with aliens.
Yeah.
I think the idea, the Fermi paradox, right? The idea that there's so many planets and so many galaxies and so many solar systems that the odds of life being out there are so high. Why have we not been contacted? That's interesting to me. It is entirely possible, in my estimation, as a moron, that we are the most advanced life form in the universe. It's
Yeah,
entirely
okay.
possible because we exist. Because we are the most advanced life form on Earth. We know that, right? As far as we know. As far as like communicating things that we've discovered in 2017, we are the most advanced. It's entirely possible that we're the most advanced everywhere.
Someone has to be.
Yeah,
someone
someone
has to be first.
Right. It could be
So,
us.
Yeah, people say like, what are the odds? But
What are the odds of us?
the first person, whoever wins the lottery goes, what
Right.
are the odds? But it happened to that person. So
Right.
it doesn't mean that it's very unlikely. It's not like we run lots of universes and see what happens.
Well, there's a
This is
direct
the one.
progression that you could follow. Like, what are the odds of someone inventing the iPhone 10 in 2017? Well, I don't know, but that's how long it took.
That's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what happened. I mean, this
Yeah.
is what we could track it. We can go back to the iPhone 1 10 years ago. It's real simple.
Yeah, people use their argument like, what is the probability?
Right.
In weird ways, like people say, what is the probability of three buildings falling from two planes hitting them? As if that argument actually makes any sense.
It's a shitty argument.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they bring it up all the time. It's like, what are the odds? Who would get so lucky that you would have three buildings on the same day?
Yeah. That
And-
doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
But
But,
people
it
love
doesn't stop
to
them.
say things like, but again, it's to support confirmation bias. So I think that it's entirely possible that we're the only advanced life form in the universe, or it's entirely possible that there are incredibly advanced life forms that really aren't interested in us.
Yeah, or we've
Or-
been quarantined.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's possible too. Like, look at our fucking president. We have a wacky president that just lies all the time. I mean, out of his fucking mind.
I think they probably would have started quarantining us a bit earlier than that.
Yeah, but I mean, what would you would go? These people don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yes,
We need to
yes.
figure out if they're going to blow each other up, and pay close attention to them. See if they don't poison their water. Like, figure out what they're going to do first before we give them new technology or
I think
communicate with them.
if there's things out there, it's probably machines.
Whoa.
I think it's, you look at the advances in AI and stuff that's going on now. I don't think there's many civilizations can really survive.
I think biological life has its time.
Yeah, because people talk about like Terminator and Skynet and things like that, and the robots taking over. And
Cylons.
I think that's actually a real problem. I think you've seen like these robots.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty crappy now, but they've got to the stage where they can do backflips and things.
Mm-hmm.
And it not too much further along the line. Like 100 years from now is like a blink of the universe's eye. We'll have robots that can do everything that humans can do and more.
Absolutely.
So
100%. Indistinguishable too from people.
Yeah, and
If
how
they choose to be.
but not just indistinguishable. They will be humans plus. They'll be like gods.
Yes. Yeah.
They will be able to do hundreds, thousands, or millions of times more powerful than humans in terms of their processing power, and hundreds of times more powerful in terms of their strength.
And that's 100 years from now.
Yeah.
We're really close to that.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's going to be an explosive thing. There's this thing in AI now called I'll write it down because I forgot what it was. Generative adaptive networks, which is this way of doing AI where the robots basically teach themselves. They have one robot who is judging things, and there's one robot that's creating things. And the robot that's creating things teaches the robot that's judging things how to judge, and the robot that's judging things teaches the creating robot how to create. And then they just go back and forth, back and forth. And the old way of doing AI was like you would teach a robot to do things, and you correct it when it gets wrong, and you tweak the algorithm. But now you've got these robots that are learning things incredibly, incredibly rapidly by teaching themselves how to do things. And the humans who are running these robots don't actually understand how this actually works. You end up with this huge, big matrix of numbers, which no one can actually decipher, but the results come out of it. They've got things like now where you can take a scene in a video, and you can turn night into day, or you can turn a snow scene into a summer scene.
Yeah.
Because they can, the robots, the AI knows how to do these things. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more coming down the line.
Yeah, I saw something that was incredibly disturbing. They said that when robots become sentient, like when they have the ability to make up their own decisions and do things for themselves, and first thing they're going to do is improve upon their own design.
Yeah.
And they will be able to have 10,000 years of human like if humans were evolving technology, a robot or a sentient AI could do 10,000 years worth of technological advancement in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And
is that real?
Yeah, because computers just run so much faster.
Just think about that number.
Yeah.
2 weeks. So think about how long ago 10,000 years ago was.
Yeah.
First civilization.
It's probably a little bit optimistic in terms of like actual physical development because they can't make prototypes fast enough to try them out.
Maybe they can. They don't sleep. They keep going.
Yeah, they will. They'll have these little robots. Then
it's going to be fucked.
Robots can move so much faster than people.
So what do? Kill them?
It
Go back to
might be a good idea.
Like a pioneer? Get a nice axe?
Some scientists are saying that we should put the brakes on this AI.
A lot of them, right?
Yeah.
But it's a funny thing. It seems like we're like moving towards the edge of the cliff, and everyone's going, "Hey, we should probably hit the brakes soon."
But it's also such a lucrative thing for people to do because if you get really good AI, you can sell it.
Right.
Yeah, and the army is going to want robot soldiers. Yeah, you got these drones with guns mounted on them. Yeah, if you can imagine, you got like your.
That scares the shit out of me. What are you showing me here, James?
I'm gonna hit play. It's really fast. It's sorting ripe tomatoes really quick. It'll slow it down here in a second, so you can see how fast it's doing it.
Whoa. How can it see oh my God. So it sees the green tomatoes and it just knocks them out?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Because the computer is essentially seeing what we're seeing now. It's like
but how is it
motion.
hitting them so perfect? That's insane. So as they're coming down this ramp, these computers are, oh my God, that's in real time?
Yeah.
Holy shit, dude.
So it's got this computer vision that's processing it. And because computers they're fast enough to do this now,
oh my God, we're fucked.
It's just going to get faster.
We're so fucked. That scares the shit out of me more than the backflipping robot.
But imagine that backflipping robot can actually move really fast.
Yeah, well, that's what Elon Musk said. That you won't be able to see him unless you have a strobe light.
Yeah, and they're going to be like super accurate at shooting things. You just take your eye out.
Yeah, they're not going to have any trigger panic. They're just going to be able to just execute.
They'll be like robots.
God damn it. So that's real. That's a real conspiracy. Put down the chemtrails, walk away from the flat earth, and understand that there's sentient robots. What did you... Okay, you have a background in computers.
Uh-huh.
What was your take on that whole thing when Google had to shut down these two computers communicating with each other because they started talking in a language that they didn't understand?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was talking about there with the generative adaptive networks. They didn't have to shut them down.
But they did because they were a little freaked out.
Well, they had to shut them down because they couldn't do anything with them.
Right.
It was the two computers talking to each other in gobbledygook. So if it was something interesting, they would have kept them and studied it.
But do you think that they knew what the computers were saying? The computers knew what they're saying to each other, or no?
No, it was just some kind of loop that they got stuck in. It probably wasn't particularly intelligent or anything.
Oh, it's so much more ominous to say that they
it's
invented
not like
a language.
They weren't like plotting to take over the world.
How do you know?
It's because we aren't there yet.
What if they could do
that, they would have already done it.
The first things computers do is sexually harass each other. They send computer dick pics.
What would that even look like?
I asked you the other day, like, what's the AI gender going to be? Has anyone decided, or has it been talked about?
Maybe that's what's going on with all this crazy push to accept 78 different gender pronouns and non-binary people and all this stuff that didn't exist in the past. Maybe maybe there's like a natural inclination in the human species to move towards a genderless prototype of the future. We went into this in depth yesterday under the influence, obviously. We did a podcast where we were talking about like what an alien is, the archetype alien with the big head and the very thin body and the mouth that's like barely visible. That I think that this is probably what we see ourselves becoming when we have some sort of a symbiotic relationship with technology, where technology becomes a part of us. When we have the ability to manipulate genes, which is absolutely coming. And then we have this enormous head, which, I mean, look at our heads, right?
It's not very practical, the enormous head.
Neil deGrasse
it's
Tyson was talking about this recently.
Whipping all over the place.
He was talking to Ray Kurzweil in a podcast that I was listening to. Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, and they were talking about the size of a human head, and that a human head could only get so big because of the mortality issue with the mother. Like if the mother could not give birth, the head can only be so big. And that it's also one of the reasons why
they're folding over the skull.
And our heads are so big that we have to be born like almost helpless, as opposed to like other animals that are born, they're pretty agile, like right out of the box, like a deer or a horse or something like that. Or even primates, like young primates, have very little body fat on them, and they're much stronger than a young human baby.
Oh, yeah.
And that the design of the vagina and the head like leaves like little room for advancement in the state that we are now.
As far as it can go.
But if we move away, I was thinking from vaginas, not nothing wrong with vaginas, ladies. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is move towards some sort of
a vat.
Yeah, something where they can put together in some sort of a new concoction, some sort of a new artificial womb that doesn't have any size constraints.
Why would you want a big head, though?
Well, if you don't give a fuck about what you look like, the big head would allow you to see the future.
But
you could have massive cut like that. That's a freaky one.
That's not really I guess it is a big head.
Well, there's that version of the alien, or there's the bodybuilder alien from Prometheus, which seems less likely.
Yeah,
that one I didn't get that at all.
He's just a grunt, I think, just a messenger boy.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. No, but I think like with the big head thing, like I don't think you need to grow bigger brains for humans. You could probably do a lot better by having some kind of implant,
right?
Some kind of silicon type thing in there, a little computer running in your brain.
But what if you had a huge computer, like 100 iPhones? Dun dun dun.
So you can't really have bigger brains as well because there's a limit to the blood supply. Like your brain is already using like
if you're using
30%.
Blood.
So you can have to like oxygen tanks strapped to your back too.
What if we go away from all that stuff? What if they figure out some sort of a fission way? Just have like whoa, what is this?
What the before? They pulled a lamb out and had it in an artificial womb, and it survived for a few weeks at least. It was growing.
How fucked up are we? We're like a few weeks. It worked a little, sort of.
Science fiction.
Now what?
Made real.
But I think that's entirely possible for the future. And then the idea of human beings moving away from biological bodies. And if they figure out a way to download consciousness, which is one of Kurzweil's things, right? They figure out a way to get to a point where consciousness is something that can be transferred.
Yeah. That's a freaky idea there.
Freaky to me because of someone like Kim Jong-un. He makes 1,000 of himself and, fucking puts them all over the world.
Well, it's like, what if, like, your consciousness gets taken over, but you actually die.
Whoa.
And this robot facsimile of you is what continues. What if you make 2 copies of yourself?
Yeah.
Do you?
One of them is a skydiver. The other, you try out bull riding.
Because if you can download
shit.
someone's consciousness, you can copy it.
You imagine if that's what you decided to do? You just do all reckless shit with one of your bodies. Like you start MMA fighting.
And then would you like download that experience back into your other body?
Yeah.
Or just die?
No, you would download it. You'd have the other body on steroids, and you have the other body like working out at the Olympic Training Center, and turn the other body into like a super athlete. And then the one that you're skydiving and doing backflips with.
I think the augmented brains are going to come along before things like that, though.
I think you're right.
And something with AI that's coming along is like chat bots on the internet, like actually creating content.
Yes.
Not just like creating like talking things, like posts on YouTube. They can create pictures like these networks I was talking about can actually create videos that look like real videos. So I think you're going to get actual content creators, which are artificial intelligence, like YouTube personalities that are actually artificial
robots.
Intelligence. Yeah.
Jesus.
But some of them will be overt, like, here's Google's new bot, posting on the internet going, hey, everybody, I'm Google. And then you'll get AIs pretending to be real people. And then you'll get these AIs pretending to be real people in thousands, if not millions, of social media accounts trying to influence people.
Wow.
And you talk about like, botnets and things, but they're just like people just posting shit, like reposting memes and things. What if you actually get an artificial intelligence that can actually hold a conversation with someone and an artificial intelligence that's actually more intelligent than the person that you're holding the conversation with. It will be able to manipulate that person and control them. And since it's a computer doing it, you could have thousands or millions of them. And you could do all kinds of targeted, like, social media campaigns.
Well, don't they say that's going on right now?
Yeah, but they're not actually like it's not an artificial intelligence having a real conversation with people. We're on the verge of that, but
they do have artificial bots that will go out and attack people.
Yeah,
they do have things along those lines.
They're simplistic things. They're spamming things.
Right.
You can tell they're a bot fairly easily.
Now.
Yeah, but we're getting to the stage where you won't be able to tell that it's a bot.
Wow.
There'll be someone who would be, in a few decades, there'll be artificial intelligences that will be just as intelligent as you or me, and will be able to have the same conversations on social media that you and I can have on social media right now, and people won't be able to tell the difference. There's this big famous test in AI, which is the Turing test, where the test is someone sits in a room with a typewriter and they talk to the computer in the other room, and if they can tell it's a computer, then it passes the Turing test and it's meant to be intelligent. And
if they can't tell that it's a computer.
Yeah, if you can't tell it's a computer.
Yeah.
So there's been very limited successes with that. If you restrict the topics to just baseball or Britney Spears or something like that, they have these very limited domains that they can talk about. But if you get a general purpose AI that is actually intelligent and has goals to change someone's mind about something like politics, you could have a real problem.
Well, we were talking about, Duncan and I yesterday, we were saying, think about someone creating an artificial version of him based on the hundreds of hours of his audio recordings.
Yeah.
Because he has so many podcasts, as do I. If somebody wanted to take a podcast like mine, where there's 1,000 episodes, and take those 1,000+ episodes and take my opinions and the way I describe things, the way I talk. Which, if you're talking to me in a podcast like this, you're just talking to me. This is what I talk like. So, and you get a bunch of variables, right? You get me excited, me depressed, me shocked, me sad, me happy. You would have so much to choose from.
Yeah,
you could kind of material. You could kind of fill in the blanks and guess pretty accurately how I would react or respond to certain things.
Yeah, one of the episodes of Black Mirror, British TV show.
Great show.
Yeah, it was about some woman whose husband had died, but she had all this video of him.
Oh.
And there was a service that set up an AI version of him, and it starts out small, like it was someone who would post on social media as him, and eventually it grew to be this big thing.
Don't tell me. Don't spoiler alert me.
All right.
I just watched an episode of it the other day.
I've been saving that one for you. I didn't want to tell you about it.
Thank you.
It's a good episode.
Oh, it's so good. I watched one the other day about the video games that they put that thing in the back of your head. Did you see that one? It's in the new season.
Yeah.
It's
I saw all of them
episode
for
2.
sure.
God damn, it's good. That's a great show.
New one's come out in a couple weeks. 3 weeks, maybe.
It's a good show.
Good
Mrs. Rogan does not like it, though. She's freaked out.
It is a bit creepy.
I think she hears too much of that shit from me, too. She just gets freaked out on technology in the future and the possibilities.
But making a fake Joe Rogan is something that is possible to a degree.
Super easy.
Right now, you could probably do something if they put enough resources in just Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
they could have something, because this type of the generative adversarial networks, this thing where they've got one judge and one generator. They'll have one AI that just tries to make Joe Rogans, and then they'll have another AI that an expert at detecting the real Joe Rogan, and it'll have all this real material to go by, and then this will keep feeding things to this, and it'll say, that's not quite right, he doesn't say like that, he narrows his eyes when he's confused, and
wow.
And eventually it will come up with something that resembles you.
Well, then it becomes a thing of how do you know you're you, and how do you know you're talking to someone else that's them? Here's the thing. Let's just say, why'd you leave this rubber dick just sitting right here, man? That's just rude. Chris Ryan gave me a rubber dick. Sorry. I just noticed it. I looked over. I had a comment. Let's say if, say your father died, which is one of Ray Kurzweil's big things. One of his primary motivations is to recreate his father. He lost his father when he was young, and he believes that through the advent of artificial intelligence and through the data that he's collected, the recordings of his father and the images, that one day he will literally be able to communicate with his father again. I don't know if that's real, but I do know that someone like Duncan, say if my friend Duncan died, it's entirely possible that within the next 50 years, they're going to be able to create a version of Duncan, and Duncan can come over and say, hi, dude, I'm back. Hey, crazy. I was dead. And I won't even know. I won't know if it's really Duncan.
You've got to watch this episode of Black Mirror then.
Okay, don't tell me anymore.
Yeah.
Don't tell me anymore. What is it?
For trying to remember where I found this, I think it was an NPR episode. It might have been on Radiolab, a thing called Dadbot. This guy made literally a text. He'd used all of his dad's past text messages between himself and him, and then made a AI bot he could chat with. Whoa. And I think his brother can use it too.
Yeah.
They can just send generic messages like, hey, how you doing? And he sends something that he would have sent back.
And meanwhile, your dad's like, shut up, faggot. Your dad just says rude shit to you. You little pussy, you're never going to amount to nothing. Oh, dad bot.
Yeah, and if that's what your dad was like, then it would do that. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
You could probably tweak it a bit, though. You could ask him to dial it down.
Yeah,
that type of thing is coming, though. Like, with it's text now, and it's not like very good. You'd be able to tell it's not a real person.
Did you like Ex Machina?
What was that?
The movie? You never saw it?
Oh yeah, I did see it, but I forget movies very quickly.
That one. That's an amazing one.
What's the plot, real quick?
The plot was there was like this one.
Right.
Did you see that? Yeah.
Where she's in a house.
Super scientist who lived in the middle of nowhere, and he had to be flown into him, and he had created that guy right there, created artificial intelligence, and they went over the Turing test and everything in that too. It's one of my favorite movies. That's one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. It hit so close to home, and there was so little cut the shit in that movie. You know, I describe movies based on the cut the shit scenes. Like some movies, like what? Oh fuck! Just cut the shit. How the hell did that happen? There was none of that in that movie to me. That movie to me was like, wow, like this all could take place.
It's funny though with these, those future robot things. There's so much of it is just trying to make a robot that's just like a human. Mm-hmm. When the robots are not going to be like humans.
They're going to be like Cylons.
It's going to be more than humans.
By your command.
Robots that are doing work, they're not going to really look like humans because it's not really practical. There will be robots that look exactly like humans, but that's just one aspect of robots.
Right.
There's going to be all kinds of much more impressive robots.
Well, like think of that tomato robot that's knocking. It didn't have to look like a person. It just has to be functional.
Yeah.
The way for it to be functional is not to look like a person.
Exactly.
It's to have these multiple fingers that can knock away these green tomatoes.
Yeah. So why build something around the limitations of the human body?
This is the same guy that is in that Black Mirror episode too. Uniquely.
Oh,
he plays
crazy.
the AI guy.
Do you think they're going to do a reboot or a sequel to Ex Machina? I'd heard they were going to.
Sure, why wouldn't? I mean, why wouldn't they?
Fucking better.
It was a really good movie. Made a bunch of money.
It was amazing. They better. I am worried about that. I am worried, and I'm also worried by the fact that guys like Elon Musk are worried. That when someone like that worries and starts talking about it, and I'm like, well, who is paying attention to this? I mean, how many people are really at the forefront, and is it possible to pull that back? Because I'm aware of what the United States is up to in terms of like what gets printed in the news. Obviously, I'm not really aware, but when you get further than that, like China, Russia, like we have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, and they must be doing this type of thing.
They must be, and if you don't, they will.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things.
AI is something they don't need this huge physical infrastructure. Like they don't need a big military or anything to do like cyber warfare with AI.
Fuck.
So they could be developing all this artificial intelligence to do things like infiltrate everybody's social media and make them vote for the different guy. Or just infiltrate all our power stations and shut them all down. That's
one of the real problems that I have today with the conversations regarding politics, regarding whether or not Russia hacked the election, is because people are so concerned with painting out their party to be innocent and the other party to be guilty, and describing all the different things that the Russians did and the interference and all of the subterfuge that's being used, that I think we're missing out on this idea that you can electronically affect the way people think about things if you have enough resources to attack an idea with propaganda through bots.
Yeah.
And this is something that you see all the time.
A lot of the stuff that Russia did was posted in closed groups on Facebook. So it's something that you really wouldn't be able to see happening. Like if
You'd have to be a part of the group.
Yeah.
So someone infiltrates.
Yeah, they join these groups,
Right.
And they have not bots so much, but like
Paid people.
workers. Like
Yeah.
they have these sweatshops where all these people are typing away, doing all kinds of stuff, pushing out these stories, and they go into these closed groups because it's harder for people to like figure out what's going on if you're in a closed group, and they post all this stuff, all these whatever anti-Hillary memes or whatever,
Right.
pro Donald Trump, like pro Bernie.
Yeah, I saw
they're trying
one
to
of them.
push a certain narrative.
One of them where the guy got busted because he accidentally had on his location and it showed that he was in Russia. And, he's some guy with make hashtag MAGA and, with the American flag and his avatar and the whole deal.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to figure out exactly what happened, but it's going to be even harder in the future, though, because people will be covering the tracks a lot better. Like, they're learning what works.
But it's really hard to figure out what's real and what's not real right now.
Yeah.
Remember Wag the Dog? What was that, like 20 years ago?
Yeah.
In that movie, they described the possibility of faking these conflicts and having this fake video and having movie directors film everything, and that would influence the way people thought about world conflicts.
And now we're getting to the stage where that technology is a lot more realistic for faking videos.
You were pretty close.
There are things where you can take audio now and just basically sample audio and create anything that person might say.
Yeah, that was a Radiolab podcast where they did it, and it's still a little crude, but like most things. I mean, you go back to the very first Oculus Rift, which was only a few years ago, and it was pixelated and clunky looking. But if you look at the HTC Vive now, their virtual reality is pretty spectacular. I mean, you could still tell that it's not real, but man, the experience is so much more immersive.
Yeah, I remember reading a book back in the 90s, I think it's Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in that where they map somebody's face onto like a porn actor. And at the time, I thought that was the most ridiculously stupid thing I've ever heard of, because it would never possibly work, and there's no way of getting that degree of accuracy. And now I've got an app in my iPhone that actually does it to a reasonable degree, where it's quite hard sometimes to see what's going on. There's this thing called Mug Life, which is it's just a toy app where you take a picture of yourself, and it instantly like maps it onto a 3D face, and you can do all these expressions, and you can say these things. It has these like meme generators, and it's basically it's that type of thing which I thought was ridiculous speculation like 20 years ago, but now it's come to pass.
Well, there's an article that I tweeted today about Gal Gadot, who is the woman from Wonder Woman. They use an algorithm and they tape her face onto a porn video.
Yeah. So
they have her doing porn, and it looks just like her. You can kind of tell a little bit that it's not her, but not much. It's enough where you're like, whoa, they're going to get really good at this, and then they'll be able to have you doing anything. You could be a murderer. They can have you outside murdering people and then put that on the news. Yeah. And then by the time they retract it, they say, oh, Mick West wasn't really out there just gunning people down. It was someone else. Your neighbors don't trust you anymore. You have to move. The damage is done. And that's not that I support like a lot of the fucking hysterics and the craziness that Trump tweets and all the different shit that he tweets. But occasionally they get things wrong, and they make stories about him, like the CNN Russia story where they had to fire those three. Well, after they had fired those reporters who had made these erroneous connections and had this like flaw-ridden piece, they fired them, but the story had already been written. Like, this is, I guess there's a rush to get things out there, and they're trying very hard. But you got to be very careful, because once something's out there, that initial thing of being out there is so much more powerful than any retraction.
Yeah, it's really hard to get retractions out because the original thing just goes so much more than the retraction.
Yeah, especially if it's crazy.
Like the Roy Moore thing, which is going on right now. There's the election today. There's a thing where they said that his signature was fake because the ink on the image was like black on one side and blue on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so they said, oh, this must have been faked because this half, the Roy is black and the Moore is blue. So I was looking into that, and I did some experiments where I did a signature and then held it at an angle and took photos of it. And I found out that there's this type of chromatic aberration from the camera which just does that with ink. And it's very easy to duplicate, and you can show that this was actually what was going on in this image, and then you can look at other images of the signature from different angles which show that it's all black. So there was this one image on CNN that showed this blue and black ink, and then I figured out that it was just this trick of the camera. But even though it's been debunked and explained, people are still spreading the exact same thing around today.
It's not real, and that could be a problem. It could swing the election.
Yeah, and it's time limited, that type of thing. Like, it's done today. After today, it doesn't really matter.
There was also something about him writing something in someone's yearbook.
Yeah, that was the yearbook thing.
Right.
Was the signature.
The thing was, they said that the woman had forged the entry to the yearbook, but that's not the case.
Right.
What she had done was written the date.
She wrote in the note, the
Yes.
oldie Hickory House.
Yes.
She wrote that underneath.
But she didn't forge the actual words.
No.
But that's a problem. The problem is that she did do it, and she didn't say she did it.
But so many people want that to be true, that it was forged.
Right.
That if you can take something that's like, slightly problematic, like her, like not saying that she actually added this annotation afterwards.
Yeah.
And then you can say that she admitted to it being forged.
Right.
Which is basically a lie. But
Yes.
it will stick for long enough. It doesn't really matter that it's a lie, because by the end of today, it doesn't really matter at all. So all he had to do was get this story out there. He had enough stuff in it to make it seem vaguely plausible to people who wanted to believe that she forged it.
Did she forge the date, and did she try to say that date was written by him?
She added a note underneath that had the date, but he had also written the date above. He wrote, to a sweeter, more darling girl I could never say, Merry Christmas, Roy Moore, 77.
Right.
And then underneath, she had written Old Hickory House, 1977.
And did she try to claim that he had written that?
Originally, it seemed like she was saying that he'd written the whole thing.
Oh.
And she read out the inscription, and she said, Roy Moore wrote this in my book, blah, 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 blah. And she read the annotation at the end.
Was the annotation at the end recent?
Yeah, and I think she said she wrote it like afterwards, after she...
like 78
no,
or some shit?
The same day.
Oh, so how the fuck could she even remember? How do you remember what you wrote down from 1977?
And the handwriting is a bit different between them, so it was fairly obvious that it wasn't the same handwriting from the start.
So I don't think that's like her today trying to frame him. That seems more like she was just documenting it at the time and forgot.
If anything, it makes it more realistic. So if she was going to forge it, she would have forged the whole thing.
Well, she's talking about something 40 years ago. Like how...
Yeah.
That's this whole thing of trying to... Like, someone saying that this definitely happened 40 years ago is, to me, so bonkers. Like,
Totally.
How the hell could you... And this is a real problem with, like, the news. There, like, one of the Al Franken accusers we were talking about yesterday had claimed that Al had grabbed her waist and squoze her fat in some sort of way. When she's talking about something 10 years ago. Like, you absolutely remember what happened in something so inconsequential 10 years ago? That seems insane to me. Now you add 30 years onto that, and I'm just calling bullshit.
Yeah, you can't really remember that level of detail after so long.
I mean, it would have to be something really significant.
But even then, about creative memories and how people's memories change over time.
Yes.
A lot of people claim they remember where they were when they heard about the space shuttle blowing up, the first one.
Yeah.
But people have done extensive research into that, like tracking people's stories over like a decade or so, and they found that like a significant percentage of people changed their stories 10 years later.
I'm sure.
As to about where they were. So like for something, like harassment or something like that, it's entirely possible that the story could change. Doesn't mean that it is false, but it's just possible that it could change.
But it's just they're conveniently forgetting or ignoring that human memory is insanely flawed and malleable.
Yeah, I think part of that's why we have statute of limitations, because like things like eyewitness testimony essentially degrades over time.
That's one of the things that I'm really hoping is going to be cured with technology.
What,
I'm hoping we're going to give up our bullshit biological memory for a fat SD card they stick in the back of your head. Just pop that sucker in there and click, and you'll have all of your memories entirely accurate. Like that was a Black Mirror episode
It was,
too.
yes. I was going to say.
Those motherfuckers are on top of everything.
They know everything.
But I really think that that's entirely possible in the future, that there's going to be some way where you have a neural interface with some sort of a recording device that's far more accurate. And that we'll all agree to it. We'll all agree to it, just like photographs. Like if Jamie is standing next to you and I say, Jamie and Mick West were in the room together, and take a picture. It used to be that I could say, well, that's definite because I have this photo. But now with Photoshop and video editing tools, so even then, so what am I talking about? Because even then your memories are going to be able to create artificial memories.
You're going to have the artificial intelligence getting into your brain and creating memories for you.
Well, that wasn't that like Total Recall, right? Wasn't that part of the idea of Total Recall? They could put like fake memories in your brain and have you have fake experiences. There's a lot of experiences that were gigantic to me. Like all of my years of martial arts competition, if you had asked me to like accurately depict some of the most significant memories of my life from like age 16 to 21, like all those martial arts fights that I had, I wouldn't even be able to touch it. I have like flashes.
Yeah, I'm starting to forget all the stuff I did at Neversoft when I was working on Tony Hawk. Like I just got interviewed they're doing a documentary about about the history of Neversoft and Tony Hawk. And the guy's interviewing me, and I'm like, I can't really remember.
Yeah.
And it was like, some of it was like 20 years ago. But it's that type of thing that I thought I would never forget.
Right.
That, because it was such a significant part of my life, but it's just kind of dropping away over the years. I think that happens a lot with, people are looking back on 9/11, and they're going by their memories of what happened that day. And it changes. Your memory changes.
Yeah, there's a few things that I remember because there like some significance to it. Like I remember the space shuttle thing because I was over at an ex-girlfriend's house, and it was one of the few times that we saw each other before we had completely stopped seeing each other. Like we had kind of broken up, and then I drove out to her house to visit her, and then while I was over her house, we saw the launch. We were like, holy shit. We actually saw the replay of it blowing up, and we're like, whoa, like this is fucked.
See, some people, they see the replay and then they remember that as seeing the actual event itself live, and so they think they saw it live, so that becomes a memory.
I'm pretty good at that. I'm pretty good at going over my memories to make sure that
you think you are.
Yeah,
you think you are. Maybe you're not. Maybe you should go back and check some of these memories.
Dun dun dun.
Find your ex-girlfriend and ask her if that really happened.
I remember very clearly where I was when Sam Kinison died. I remember definitely where I was when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Because I got some calls from friends, and they woke me up. My phone kept ringing, and I remember that. Because I remember being in my house, and I remember turning on the TV. That's 100%.
I was driving to work. I was on the 405. So I remember that. It seems to me very solidly. But there are details around that. Like I remember I went to Taco Bell on the way to get some food because I thought it might be a long day.
Because of the attacks?
I went to a gas. Now I can't remember now. I went to a gas station where I think I went to Taco Bell. Dang it. Now I'm starting to forget what happened on 9/11.
I remember the day because I spent it with Eddie and Joey Diaz and a couple other friends of mine. We went to a burrito joint on Sunset in Hollywood, and we were just talking about how there's no flights. Like, look, because we'd heard that the flights end. Like, look, man, you see a plane in the sky. This is weird. It felt weird. We felt like we were stuck in California. Whereas, like, the freedom of air travel is something that if you don't fly a lot, you don't think about. But if you really do, they pull it away, and like, there's no more air travel. You're like, what? Yeah. We're stuck here. How long does it take to drive to Colorado? like, dude, that's 16 hours. Yeah, shit. Like you don't think about it.
Going back in time in a way, like back to a different time.
Yeah, well, at least you have cars.
You have to take the train.
Yeah. So is there anything else that we might disagree on?
What may disagree on? I don't know. What I think we agree on the flat Earth stuff.
No. You think the Earth is round, right?
What about
I changed my tune.
What about DeLong, Matt DeLong?
What's that one?
The the guy who from Blink 182.
Oh,
Tom DeLonge.
Tom DeLonge. Oh, he's out of his fucking mind.
I can't remember people's names.
Poor bastard. Yeah, he's got some weird shit going on, and since that podcast, a bunch of people have pointed out to me that he is essentially they're selling stock in a company.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're selling stock, and also he gets a guaranteed payout.
Yeah.
Of like I think $100,000 a year or something like that.
Well, whatever it is,
regardless of how much money they take in or what they make.
If you get enough rubes to keep donating money to this. I mean, he keeps saying, stay tuned, things are going to happen.
Yeah, he said there's going to be some videos released.
Yeah, when did he say that?
Like nearly a month ago now, I think.
Dude, when he was on the podcast, he played some videos for us that were like absolutely UFOs, and I almost pissed my pants laughing. They were so bad. It was so bad. One of them was so fucking bad. I was like, dude, if that was in a movie, I would want my money back. I would be angry.
So, like, what? I mean, is he a crazy guy or is he like a smart guy who's making money?
I do not know.
I think he must like this
He
UFO
loves
stuff.
it. He loves it.
Otherwise, he'd stay singing and making money.
Yeah, but the conversation. Look, there's two ways to approach this, and I tried to be respectful, because I'm the host, and he agreed to come here and he wanted to talk about this. So I tried to be respectful and let this guy talk. And what he was saying to me was so ridiculous. I was like, I don't even have to challenge him on this because it's so obviously ridiculous. Everyone is going to see that it's ridiculous. I was wrong. There was a lot of people that listened to that podcast that I saw on Twitter that thought that what he was saying was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And this is real. Those are the people that are going to donate.
Exactly.
Right. Now, is there a problem with that? Is there a problem with the Catholic Church? Because they're full of shit too.
Yeah, I'd
right?
say so.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Catholic Church is essentially a money-making franchise.
And they don't have to pay taxes.
Yeah.
At least he has to pay taxes. I mean, is there a problem with conning rubes out of money?
There's loads of like Kickstarters for technology things that just couldn't
Never
possibly
happen.
work. Like there's these like clear air holograms. They say you'll be able to play video games on the table in front of you.
Oh yeah, there's GoFundMes for people that don't have illnesses. That you know, yeah.
There's like one where they had a water bottle that would magically take water out of the air.
I saw that one.
Yeah, but it won't actually work. It would take like 3 days to fill the bottle if you were in a rainforest. And it would require like a solar panel that's like, this big.
I saw that one.
It's
I was
far
like,
easier
what
to
is
bring
that?
your own water. But they raised like, $2 million.
And what do they have to do with that money? They're allowed to keep it?
They can keep it if they want to.
Wow.
Yeah. The Kickstarter, I think it's Kickstarter, has this like open thing where, it's you're developing a prototype so it doesn't actually have to work.
Wow. So what happens with that? So all those people, is this it?
Is this it?
Qantas, yeah. No, they only
That's
got
still going?
345. I think they might have like...
That's Indiegogo, though. They might have been on a couple
yeah.
of different platforms.
Yeah, one of them is more relaxed than the other in terms of what it will allow. Like one of them now, you've got to have a working prototype.
The self-filling water bottle.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Who's this guy?
It can't possibly work.
He's the guy who created it?
Yeah, a lot of these, they're like Eastern European, like scientist types who do things like this.
So they made it look like this dude's just driving around, and then this
bottle's
water
filling up
bottle's
by
going to
itself.
pull it out of air, and then he can just pull it out of the tube, and wow, look, I've got water all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Look at this dipshit.
It can't possibly work. It uses a real technology, like these little electrical things, actually cool things down and condense things, and it will actually condense a little bit, but hardly anything.
So it would take a long ass time for that to fill a water
It's basically
bottle.
a dehumidifier. I don't know if you have like a dehumidifier
I have
in your
the
house
opposite.
at all.
I have a humidifier because California's dry.
Yeah, if you ever have a dehumidifier, it'll eventually fill up the container of the dehumidifier. But this is this thing powered by plugging it into the wall, and it's this big machine, and it still takes all day to fill up the reservoir.
Right.
So they're saying like a little water bottle this size with a little solar panel and this little condensing thing that's this big will fill it up in a few hours.
Well, maybe it's like that
It's physically impossible.
physical face technology swapping thing that like 20 years ago was impossible, but 20 years from now, maybe they're playing the long game with this water bottle.
You can improve computers, but you can't really improve the laws of physics. You can only get so much water out of a parcel of air.
So they would have to have some sort of better mechanism for extracting it than what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of scams out there. I don't know if that's what he's doing. When I talk to people that knew him from a long time ago, he's been obsessed with UFOs forever. So his obsession seems to be legitimate. However, when I was talking to him about all the events, and I was like, "Tell me what happened. You got a guy contacted you. Well, I can't say who. I can't say what it was. I can't tell you that. We can't get into that. That's all bullshit.
Yeah.
When someone starts talking like that, they're full of shit. He definitely seemed to be a combination of deceptive and delusional.
Well, the slides that he used in the talk to illustrate, there was like an event of some UFO buzzing a aircraft carrier, and some fighter jets were going after it, and they couldn't find it. And they put up some slides on the screen there, which looked like a shiny silver penis flying around. And it was actually something that, the type of thing we do on Metabunk is identify objects like that. So we figured out what this was, and it's actually a number 1 numerical helium balloon, like the digit 1.
Oh, wow. Like someone's, like from a party.
Yeah, and I found like a bunch of other shots of the same thing where you can see it rotating, and you can see it's fairly clear it's this number 1. But it's on this this conspiracy website. They thought it was a UFO, so he got it off that and said this is a UFO. Took the image, kind of degraded it a bit so you can't really tell what it was. It was quite hard for me to track it down because he'd messed with it so much. But it was actually just this helium balloon that was that was shiny.
What's disturbing to me is that he's got this business that claims to be some sort of aerospace business, and he's involved in it with all these other people.
That's weird, because the guy who's running that, can't remember his name, Fortune or something like that, is like a real guy who worked at Lockheed Martin or somewhere on the skunk works.
Maybe started doing Adderall, started getting crazy.
But what he's talking about, it makes no sense whatsoever. He says, our mission is to take what the science division gives us, and we'll turn that science into flying craft.
Right.
But the science division doesn't really exist.
Right.
They've got like a guy who's like, one guy who's interested in like shooting things with lasers to make them go fast.
Yeah, that was one of the weird things.
Yeah, I mean, that's
talking about.
kind of a real technology. You can use a laser to power a craft. But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about some kind of a craft that warps the very nature of time and space itself, and kind of like rides a wave of a wormhole or something like that.
Yeah.
And this guy thinks that it's plausible. And all they have to do is kind of like try really, really hard. If they all put their heads together, and like this scientists do all this science a lot, and then these builders do their really good building based on these really good science they're going to get, then they'll get this flying craft.
Yeah.
But it's nonsense. Nothing's going to happen.
Haven't people donated something like $2 million or some goofy?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
How many fucking people have done that? See if you can find that out.
It says 2,092.
2,092 people have donated?
Just over $2 million, yeah.
Wow.
So that's like $1,000 each.
That's a lot.
On average.
That seems wrong.
I know the numbers have changed frequently.
Well, the numbers seem really high in terms of the amount of donations. Like, it's very odd that you're going to get 2,000 people to donate $1,000 each. That doesn't seem right to me.
There could be a few very large donors that is somehow convinced to donate via this.
There are a lot of really fucking crazy old people that believe in this shit, and they might have a ton of money.
What's that red line meant to represent? It kind of looks
UFOs,
like a rod.
bro.
Yeah.
They're flying right above.
All right,
To the stars. Academy of Arts and Science. That's what kills me. What kind of arts? What are you doing? Fingerprint?
I was tracking those numbers for a while, and they were going up unproportionately, if that's the correct word to say, from each other. The investor number was going up while the dollar number was sort of staying the same.
So maybe he was calling these people, if you can double your offer,
getting a lot of small
I can
donations.
get you on the first ship.
It's a minimum of 200, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it's on the small print down there.
Yeah.
So some large donations. It's amazing, though,
200 is
that
still pretty large.
Donated $2 million to this wacky-ass fucking company.
Yeah, and all the company is required to do is pay DeLong $100,000 a year for, I think, the next 7 years or something. And that's it, really.
The crazy thing, too, was that he had been contacted by the government because they knew that he could go on shows like mine and talk about this, and then he would have a platform because he's a rock star. I was like, what? This is like some
Why didn't the government stop him?
Yeah, this is like some bad movie shit. Like, this narrative is like a bad movie.
It's like people say they don't want to talk to me on the phone because they're afraid of the government tracking them down and assassinating them or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, I'm talking to you on Facebook. Well,
Yeah.
if I really was like this, agent of the government, it wouldn't be very hard to just say, get rid of this guy.
That's a big one they like to pull on you because you debunk things. You're an agent of the government.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really hard one to get around. I think that my approach there is just to be as honest as possible all the time. So I always tell them exactly who I am, like that I made lots of money doing the Tony Hawk video games. I'm just like a British video game programmer, and I basically give my life story
Yeah.
to them.
They don't buy it.
They
Not
don't.
buying it, pal.
They don't. But I think some of them, it helps telling them about Tony Hawk.
Yeah.
'Cause a lot of them actually are fans of Tony Hawk. And
That's funny, actually. Well, it's one of those things where if you don't want to believe, you're not going to. You're gonna that's a likely cover story for a guy, and then they'll go super deep. Oh, the government has infiltrated video games in order to keep kids stupid. They've created these games in order to mess with the kids' minds. And
one reaction I get quite a bit is that I am stupid.
that you're stupid?
Yeah, a lot of people will say that I am really stupid. Like, there's people who are in the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth type thing who think that I'm really stupid and don't understand physics at all, and so that they say that I'm not a government agent. I'm just this really stupid dude who doesn't understand what actually happened on 9/11.
Useful idiot, right?
Yeah, and not just a useful idiot in that sense, but a person who is just mistaken.
Right.
So then they can dismiss my videos by laughing at them.
Right.
Like I do lots of little videos where I do things like demonstrate how something buckles, like a column buckling when you put a load on it. You go dunk.
Right.
Or things like that. Just physics videos, and then they just say, "Oh, you're an idiot. We don't need to look at this video." So it's a way of getting around the problem. And a lot of other people say that I'm so smart about chemtrails and things like that I must be a government agent because I know so much about contrails. So I get both sides of it. I'm either a really smart government agent or I'm just a stupid, useful idiot.
Well, it's just them looking at you and trying to find some way to dismiss what you're saying. But you really get a kick out of debunking shit.
I do. It's fun. I like doing the backyard science stuff. There was a thing I did recently where the scientists were saying that the bits falling off the World Trade Center were leaving trails that must be from the rocket motors that are pushing them away from the World Trade Center. So I said, no, it's probably just some dust on it. And they said, no, it wouldn't do that. It wouldn't leave a long trail. So I got a big sledgehammer and I piled some ashes on it from my fireplace. And then I stood on top of a wall and I was throwing this sledgehammer with a big trail of dust coming from it for like half an hour, videoing myself doing it until I got some representative videos of it. It's just fun to do.
It is kind of fun. One of the ones that kept coming up that I thought was the most ridiculous one about the flat Earth was I'd read this a couple of places where people were talking about ships disappearing on the horizon.
Yeah.
And then the ship disappeared, but if you pulled out optics, you zoom in, you could still see the ship.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, how come you can't see Mount Everest, motherfucker? Why can't you look towards Japan? Where's Mount Kilimanjaro? Get up.
Yeah.
How come you can see the moon? You can see the moon. If you get a good telescope, you can see the moon really clearly. Take that telescope, don't point at the moon, point it across the ocean. Where's the mountains?
It's the atmosphere. That's what I'll tell you.
Oh, the atmosphere.
Yeah, the kind of advanced version. I was talking about how architects and engineers for 9/11 have to do this really advanced thing now because we've debunked the basic stuff, so they have to move to this advanced stuff. Same thing with flat Earth people. Now they kind of you demonstrate how things actually do go over the horizon, and mountains do get obscured by the horizon, and how the sun sets and things like that. And so they come up with this complicated explanation where there's this kind of giant refractive lens of atmosphere above the Earth, which is bending all the light from the sun in such a way that the Earth appears to be round, even though it's actually flat. Dun, dun, dun. Which kind of begs the question, like, how do they actually know it's round if it looks... How do they know it's flat if it looks round?
Right.
So they've got, things are disappearing over the horizon as if it looks round because of this refraction thing. But they think it's flat. But if it looks round, why are they thinking it's flat?
Well, the thing that killed me was that you could zoom in on it, and that proved that it wasn't actually disappearing over the horizon. I know a little bit about optics because of my fascination with the outdoors. I have a bunch of binoculars, spotting scopes of various power, and there's things you just cannot see, but then you get a good spotting scope on them. So with the naked eye, Like there's things you can't see with the naked eye. You would swear they do not exist. They're not there. But then you get a great spotting scope on them and you can see them miles away. And that's the thing with ships. You get a large ship. If it goes far enough away, you can't see it anymore. And you'll be convinced that it's disappeared over the horizon when in fact it's only probably a couple of inches lower on the horizon as far as like the curve of the Earth, but to the naked eye, it's invisible.
Yeah,
so when they zoom in on it, they're convinced that, aha, there is no curvature of the Earth. See, this looked like it went over the horizon, but it's an optical illusion.
Yeah, and the thing is they've been shown this so many times that
Exactly.
this actually happens. There's so many videos now on YouTube that actually demonstrate this thing, like there's time lapses of ships going over the horizon, like zoomed in all the way with the P900 cameras, which do like an 83 times zoom, as big as you can go.
Yep.
It's been demonstrated. They just ignore it, or they say it's all made up.
They ignore it because it's not in their same YouTube queue. You know, if you look at the you're playing the flat Earth video, all the queue to the right is like flat Earth exposed.
Some of that,
exposed.
yeah, some of those get hundreds of thousands of views. There's this one guy, Dr. Zach, who's I don't know where he's like a foreign guy who does these
Russian.
Yeah, he does these flat Earth videos, and they're all mathematical. He's showing things in like AutoCAD with drawing lines and stuff, and he gets like 400,000 views.
It's amazing.
It's bizarre.
Well, it's just amazing that so many people get into this and they buy into it. Do you see that one where that young man took a spirit ruler, spirit level on an airplane?
Yeah.
And was flying around an airplane and was convinced.
Daryl Martin is that guy's name. He lives in a van.
Does he?
Yeah, he has a bunch of videos on van life. He's a cool guy. He's a very nice guy, but he's got this weird idea about the flat Earth.
It's so
I've had a few
ridiculous.
YouTube battles with him.
Oh, battles.
Where like he puts up something about how the moon is cooling things, and he has this thermometer thing where it's showing that the moon is actually making things cold. Then I put up a video explaining why it's just a reflection because these infrared thermometers don't work that way. And then he puts another thing like, debunk this, Mick West. And I kind of gave up at that point. It was a very short battle.
Well, the weird thing is that they see all these other planets as round, but they decide that the Earth is flat, that it's some sort of a flat disk.
Yeah, they think they're different, though.
Yes,
they
that
think
the
the
Earth is a
planets are
different
just
thing.
like these tiny little balls that are like 2 miles wide or something.
And they think the Earth is really close to the sun.
Yeah, they think it's about 4,000 miles away. Or some of them think it's only 4 miles away.
Oh, you fucking idiots.
But they think the distance to the sun varies depending on the observer. Like it's observer dependent.
Oh, like where you are?
Yeah.
If it's only 4 miles away, imagine if you drive away, it just gets super small. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense.
It's so ridiculous. But it's just, to me, it's such a strange thing to concentrate on, that this is like, their identity is wholly invested in proving this thing to be some sort of a massive conspiracy. It's very, very, very strange.
They love it.
You love it? They love it. You love it too,
they-
though. You love debunking
That's
it.
the thing. It's like it's a rabbit hole for debunkers.
Yeah.
It's a flat Earth. You just get sucked into it.
It's one of the best ones because it's so silly.
It is.
There's no, and then here's the thing that people send me. The people, like, I don't know if they're trolling me or if they're serious. They'll send me a picture of a glacier and they'll go, there's your ice wall.
Yeah, they show you the Ross ice
Shill.
shelf or something like that, like an actual ice shelf in Antarctica, and you can look up the picture and see what it actually was.
And they think there's a government. The government is like guarding the ice wall all around, so you can't get near it, take pictures of it.
Yeah, the thing like the southern hemisphere is a huge problem for the flat earthers.
Yeah,
because you can have like somebody standing on like the south of South America, someone in Australia, and they're both looking south, which on a disc would be away.
Right.
Looking in completely different directions, and they're both actually, because they're both fairly close to each other, really, they're looking at the same stars in the sky.
Yeah.
And there's even the really complicated explanations for the flat Earth don't explain that. So it's like one of the hard, irrefutable proofs of a round Earth.
Well, they also
is the southern constellations.
They keep changing their story based on what gets debunked. Like the big one that Dubé was saying forever, every photograph of Earth from space is a composite. Well, that's not true. They have full scale, full image, high resolution photographs from the Himawari 8. Yeah, those are fake. Then they decided that those are fake. So at first it was they're composites.
Yeah.
which there was some composites from lower satellites. And then
blue marble thing, that's how that got started. There's the famous image of the blue marble, which is a NASA very high resolution image that they did back in like the 90s from composites, because they wanted to get something which had all of the landmass without any clouds on.
Right.
So they had to take loads and loads of pictures and just take the bits that had no clouds on and then stitch them all together.
Right.
And then they created this thing. And then they did a separate one that had just the clouds, and then they could put them together and move them around and stuff.
How many different satellites are taking full Earth images?
Probably around 30 or 40.
How many of those are run by government shills?
They're all run by government. Actually, no, they're all run by government.
Well, Himawari 8 is the Japanese one, right?
Yeah, there's a Russian one, which is about the same. There's actually 2 Russian ones. There's a European one, Meteosat. The American high-resolution one just went up a few months ago. It's offline at the moment because they're moving it from one side of the United States to the other.
Damn, they moving it? How long does that take?
A few days.
Jesus. Now,
You have to be careful.
Yeah, how the fuck do they do that?
Little jets.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you've seen gravity.
Yeah.
That's how things move around. They go poof, and things move in the opposite direction.
And then they anchor it in that spot?
That is something that confuses people, is how do rockets work in space? They think that because there's no atmosphere in space, there's nothing to push against.
Right.
So how does a rocket actually work in space?
How does it?
It's action and reaction. If you throw something in this direction, you will move in the opposite direction.
Ah, I see.
If you sit in your chair, take a big bowling ball or something, throw it in that direction really fast, you'll
push
move back a bit.
Right.
So if you get like an air hose and you point it in that direction and you're standing on ice or something, you'll move in the opposite direction. It doesn't matter if there's air. It's you throw something that way, there has to be a reaction in the opposite direction.
Okay, that makes sense. A lot of those guys don't even believe in satellites.
Yeah, they don't, because how could they?
They think that signals are bounced off the ionosphere. There's no satellite.
Yeah, but you can see the satellites.
Yeah,
You can see the space station.
Yeah,
you can see it fly overhead, and I get emails whenever it's going to fly overhead, and I go out and have a look, and you can see I've taken pictures of it. You can see the solar panels in the photographs that I've taken.
Wow.
And it always appears exactly where NASA says it's going to appear, everywhere in the world.
That's the other problem with these people that don't believe in satellites, is that how are we tracking the weather then? How do we know exactly when the hurricanes are coming in?
Yeah, weather balloons.
Yeah, it's my concern about all this, in particular, like the flat Earth stuff, is young kids wasting their time on stupid shit when the world is filled with massive, real mysteries and incredibly fascinating things that you should be diving in and learning about.
I think there's a great opportunity for teaching kids with things like flat Earth.
Yes.
Because you can do real experiments to determine that the Earth is not flat. That it's actually
Also,
round.
maybe even more importantly, teaching them about traps, thinking traps.
Yes.
The mind can allow you to go down.
You can teach them how to debunk. You can say, this guy is saying that ships should reappear when we zoom in. How do we test this?
Right.
And then they can go out and test it.
Yeah. Well, that one was so stunningly stupid to me. And then I don't even want to go into the flat Earth thing anymore. But it's the thinking behind it that's the problem. The thinking that every single airline pilot, everyone involved in commercial shipping, everyone involved in aerospace, everyone who makes satellites, all those people are lying. Every cartographer, everyone, all the map makers, everyone, they're all full of shit. Everyone has agreed to not tell everyone else about the ice wall. If the Earth was flat and there was an ice wall, scientists would detail it, and they would explain why the Earth was flat, and they would show you a working model of the Earth being flat, and that's what they would teach in school. There would be there's no benefit whatsoever to describing the Earth in a shape that it doesn't exist in.
And it would be obvious that the Earth was flat because you could be able to do like really simple tests yourself. You would see boats not going over the horizon.
It's just so disturbing.
You would see the sun get smaller as it gets further away.
Yeah.
The sun stays exactly the same size throughout the day. Sunrise, noon, sunset, all exactly the same size. The moon does the same thing.
Why does the moon look so much bigger though when it's on the horizon? What's that about?
Optical illusion.
What is it? Is it a perspective issue?
Yeah,
If
it's
closer?
it's like just the way your brain works. If you take photographs of it, like on the horizon, and then another photograph of it when it's right up there, and compare them side by side, if you're the same zoom settings, it's exactly the same.
That's interesting because it really does look larger when it gets lower.
Yeah, it's purely psychological.
The harvest moon, right?
Yeah. What is the harvest moon?
Isn't that big old red moon or something?
That's the blood moon. That's an eclipse.
It's had the beaver moon too.
Beaver moon.
The
Yeah.
beaver moon.
It's a
That's
really
a new one.
big one.
I didn't know about a beaver moon.
I didn't
man.
either until they said it.
There's the super moon, which is when the moon is just very close to you.
What is the supermoon? How much closer is the supermoon?
It's not much closer.
Really?
It actually only gets about 8% bigger than its smallest. It's actually very hard to see that it's actually any bigger if you put them side by side.
That's a lot, though.
But people, you see these news stories about supermoon. Go look at the supermoon tonight.
Mm-hmm.
When it's it's not that much difference.
Oh, wow. That looks a little bit different.
But that's the very smallest moon and the very largest moon. Most of the time it's going to be somewhere in between that, so you're not really going to notice the difference.
All right. Anything else we should cover before we wrap this up?
I don't know. Let me look at my list. I have to write lists because my memory is so bad nowadays. I can't. I've offloaded everything. Like, you're a stand-up comedian, so you've got to be able to memorize all this stuff.
Well,
So,
not only that, I have to memorize fights, too.
yeah.
I have UFC information in my head, and I have comedy information in my head. But if you ask me to do my act that I did from last year,
Right.
like that I filmed for my Netflix special, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, I'm looking at my list, and we've kind of covered most of the things that are on here. We could go over
Beautiful.
some like 9/11 crap if you wanted to, but
I'm tired of it
yeah.
all. That's the thing about it. At this stage of my life, it seems when there's so many incredible things to pay attention to that are real, and this is what I feel like about all this stuff where people are looking into conspiracies that they're just nonsense. It's like they're chasing their tail. They're trying to confirm something where there's so much evidence that it's not real, that it just it really bothers me. It drives me nuts, and I just don't understand it, and I wish that it wasn't a problem. I wish it wasn't an issue, and it is. And it's one of the reasons why I continue to talk about these things, and I really want to shine as much light on them as possible, so that there's a real pattern that you could fall into, and you can waste a tremendous amount of time in your life if you start looking at things incorrectly. And Flat Earth, to me, is the best example of it. It's the best example because it's so stupid. I mean, it's so utterly preposterous that everyone is lying, and that there are no images at all of this Flat Earth, but yet this one guy or a couple guys. And I had heard that it had started all out as a troll on 4chan, is that they had started doing this like way back in, like...
It could have been, but the flat earth thing goes back to the 1800s.
Right, but that
we talked
people had
about
like
last time.
reignited it.
Yeah, they were just using that as a shit posting, was what we talked about last time. Just,
shit posting.
But people have always believed in the flat earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up, Mick West.
All right.
So metabunk.com, if anybody wants to go.
.org.
.org, pardon me.
And my upcoming book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole,
When is that coming out?
next September. But
Have you finished it? Have you done?
nearly done, yes.
Nearly done.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, Mick West, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. See you then.